Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here and to have this great panelists here. So we changed it a little bit into a panel session.
So, sorry for that, sir. May I invite now Avener. He is a founder, president, and CEO at ITRAN. Welcome you, sir.
Sorry that you have been forgotten. So it's an honor to be here to present you this panel here. As I said, we changed it to a panel on a very short notice to make it a little bit more interesting for you to talk about the experience, and I think we have a lot of experience here on the stage. To the opening remark, I would hand over to Manoj Sharma, the German here. Please come over.
Very good afternoon to all of you, my fellow distinguished panelists on the dais, persons representing the industry and the distribution utilities, and also the participants here from other organizations, ladies and gentlemen. This year we are seeing, with the introduction of RDSS last year, we are seeing that the pace of introducing and implementing the program for smart metering is picking up the pace. It's a very humongous, very big task before all of us. But I'm sure the journey would be quite exciting for all of us. The target set is almost 250 million of smart meters. The sheer size of the operations or the project that we are looking at excites me. In the past also we have seen, as part of Saubhagya scheme, where we set a target for before us to complete universal access to electrification that we achieved in record time. This target I am sure we would also be able to achieve with the help of, with the participation of all stakeholders, whether it's academia or the industry or the consumers or the utility or the industry, regulators also. I'm sure that all of us would be willing to give best of our cooperation and support so that this target is achieved. Already as part of RDSS, the ministry has already approved around 20 or 200 million, we can say 200 million of smart meter program. Out of that, almost 1 crore have already been tendered and ordered for. Almost 10 crore are under various stages of bidding. So in phases, we would be able to complete the target. We would be able to finish the ordering at least, and then over a period of time, we will see the implementation also. With the implementation in place, when I say implementation, I mean the installation. With the installation in place, then new set of challenges would crop up. How do we integrate the meters, the smart meters provided by various manufacturers, and with the existing softwares or the systems in place at the consumer, at the distribution companies level. Then the new set of challenges would also come in form of acceptability by the consumers. How do the consumers respond to that? And what is the response of the regulators? Whether we would be seeing a uniform approach in terms of recovery of cost by the regulators, or we would be having, if not 100% a uniform approach, largely an approach which we can see can be replicated across India, across various states, so that the industry and the consumers, they also get some clear idea that this is how the ecosystem would be responding to this new set of requirement. But when it comes to taking up with the consumers, the experience has been where the consumer has been informed in advance, where the consumer has been taken on board about the implications, what they can look for from this new setup, what is the benefit that would be accruing to them. Their participation is easier. Their involvement in the process is more that of an ownership. Otherwise, we face problem when it comes to implementation. The consumers, if they do not get the confidence that the new system would give them also a benefit, their participation would be fraught with resistance. So it is essential for us also that we keep consumer also on board. Similarly, the distribution utilities have also to see what are the new systems, what are the new setup they have to put in place so that there is a sort of seamless transition into the new system. I am sure with this deliberation before us, we would be able to have some conclusion, we would have some understanding amongst all of us, so that when we move out of this room, we can say that we have gained a status basically from where we can take the project further. Now I hand it over to my fellow panelists to share their views on this. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you much for that introduction. Maybe I can add some words from my side, my experience in it, because this is actually where we based a couple of questions on. After I have done that, I will ask you to introduce yourself and present you. Even we all know that this is more or less a family meeting here, and everybody knows you already. I'm starting on my side, so my name is René Böhringer. I'm CEO and founder of Cuculus GmbH. We are a company who is specialized in software, on the software side, in metering, head-end systems, MDM solution, vending, prepayment. And we are doing that worldwide since actually 15 years. We are dedicating 100% or even more of our time of the whole company only to this subject. So we have seen quite some projects all around the world. You might see here some in this. So implementations we have led in Romania, in Austria, in Belgium, Sweden, UAE, Brunei, Tajikistan, some smaller things also in India, and also in South Africa and other African countries. All of them have totally different requirements in terms of regulation, in terms of the acceptance of customers to this new approach or the digital meter, and also in terms of the return on investment you can generate out of the project. So not in all of the countries it is actually only limited to the metering or the billing or the loss reduction. It can also include much more other services which can be revenue drivers for the applicants in the future. There, another couple of things are always the same. These are the challenges we would like to address a little bit later. So I think everybody in the world is fighting for and with standards. We have to consider a lot of processes, business processes as well as technical processes to be considered during such a rollout phase. And I think most of the Indian utilities will face this kind of impact only later. So I'm normally used to give that explanation or an example of E.ON, the biggest European utility. So they have analyzed their process landscape. They have around about 900 business processes, and more than 850 of that business processes are impacted by a smart meter solution. So if you only think about your meter reading process and try to replace them, the project will definitely fail. It's good and it's time to discuss also a lot of these other processes. But before we go into that, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself. Sunil, would you do it here? Or?
Hello. My name is Sunil Singhvi. I am CEO of Energy of Secure Meters.
I'm Anil Raval, and I'm MD and CEO of IntelliSmart Infrastructure Private Limited.
I am Abhijit Grewal. I'm the marketing director at Silicon Labs. So we are the leader in IoT wireless connectivity. Majority of the smart meters which are actually deployed in India today basically are running on our silicon.
Hi, I'm Shubroto Das. I head Oracle's energy and water business for India. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I am Marc Delandre. I am the chairman of the G3 Alliance, Besides, I am also within Enedis, director for new technologies on the network. And another information for you, 4 years ago, I have been appointed director for a smart metering project in India, and we have achieved the rollout of 12 lakhs, that's to say 1.2 million prepaid smart meter in Bihar.
I am Yogesh Kumar, Director Commercial, Madhyanchal Vidyut Vicharan Nigam, UP.
Hi, I am Avner Metmore. I'm the founder and CEO of Itran Technologies, a powerline communication chip and solution based in Israel.
Manoj Sharma, Director Commercial Power Finance Corporation Limited. PFC is a Maharatna company under the administrative control of Ministry of Power. We are into financing of power projects. Thank you.
And I am Phil Beecher, President and CEO of Y-Sun Alliance. I'm also very active in standards development for communications within IEEE.
Thank you very much. I would like to open that session with a little story I have seen actually with one of our customers. So this customer actually asked a couple of vendors to install, as a proof of concept, 900 meters in a high-rise building. All the meters were in one single building. They started installing that to prove the different technologies. There was actually some wired cable approach, some wireless approach, also some PLC solution was in place. And in one of the presentations I witnessed that the vendor actually showed in a nice dashboard all these 899 meters. So the EVP of that utility was asking, okay, this really looks nice, everything is green, all the 899, but where is the 900th meter? And this guy said, we don't know. And he said, okay, go and find it out. So they had to send 3 people for 1 day in this building to find that meter. What they forgot was indexing. So even not the basic indexing on the building, which makes no sense if you only have this data, if 900 meters are in the same building. But this shows the importance of data, also during the rollout process and to gather them. So that would be my first question. So what do you think about customer indexing? And if that is at the moment in the projects in India considered already with the priority it should have? I will not go through everybody, but if somebody has an opinion about the points, then please. Sonia?
I think consumer indexing is one of the big challenge. And I think we have very learned, utility experienced people here. We have 4 or 5 challenges. One is the existing database of the utility. Because although customers are existing, but sometimes the name and the address, etc., and location to trace is very, very difficult. And so when you go for a, say, 300,000 customer base, you may locate about 200,000, remaining 100,000 becomes very difficult to locate. And last 5,000-6,000 becomes very, 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 very difficult to locate. So I think before you start any project, the important is, while doing server or anything, the correcting database is the most important, before even you index to transform anything else. The second is the type of tool used and the skill of the manpower. Because even 2% error in the survey may lead to the disastrous result in your auditing or in any analysis you want to do. Because if you hire a contractor and if they don't use proper tools and no proper surveillance of their work is there, then you get very, very wrong results. Number 3, the biggest problem is the maintainability. I remember since last 15, 20 years, I've been seeing the tenders for even separate tenders for consumer indexing. And number of tenders, they wrote one-time activity. And believe me, consumer indexing is not a one-time activity. And where we struggle, unless the connection processes and the network management processes are properly recorded and proper processes are followed, you may do indexing, but after 6 months, the data will be again garbled. And you will face the same problem. Sometime even you don't get 1 meter data, Because somebody will change in your backend system, the information of the modem or whatever, then you don't get data. So I think the way forward, my view for the industry here, my colleague for fellow industries, I think survey will not help. There are various technological options we have to think, few technology support, few can be thought of. How to meter and system can automatically index itself. That is the way forward, otherwise maintainability will be difficult. But more important is that daily network changes takes place because there are a lot of ring main systems operating. Power goes from one side to another side. Your bus sectionalizers are open, bus breakers are connected. Unless those data are maintained in substations, because what Government of India is looking for the loss reduction, you will not get the desired results. So proper record keeping will be the more important in addition to the indexing.
Thank you.
Indexing is the most important for the smart metering purposes. Because if indexing is defective, then many of the parameters that we are going to cater in the future will be affected, like energy accounting for the consumers. So when a person is going for indexing, then there are multiple type of consumers we are finding that presently if you think that there are 100 consumers on a feeder or DT, then there may be 110 consumer at the site. That means 10 consumer or 5 consumer we find that are not in our system. Only because of we have multiple time converted the data from one system to second system. Originally we have manual system, then data at the one server. Then we have changed to other system, spot billing. Then afterward we have changed to server-based billing, RPDRP billing. Then the data migration takes place from multiple time to multiple time. And there is a provision in, I think, all utilities. In our utility, there is a provision that if a consumer is disconnected for 6 months, then that consumer automatically goes to not billed cases. That means not billed cases is not billed forever after going to not billed cases. And that data is not coming to the SBM, that means spot billing machine also. So that is, this type consumer is also at this site we find in consumer indexing. So consumer indexing is if effective both way for the purpose of data collection as well as the consumer that are not accounted or not paying to the utility. So we have to give more emphasis. If consumer indexing is perfect, then in future all things, even maintenance, energy accounting, all will be perfect.
Thank you.
I fully agree with my colleagues, and I will add some more comments. Within EDF, we have a strong experience, and we have achieved in the world the rollout of almost 50 million smart meters in France, in other European countries, in Egypt, and as I said, also 1 million in India. Smart metering is the first step for smart grid. In 2 or 3 years, we will discuss in this room how to manage also not only smart metering, but renewables connection for single dwelling houses, charging points for electric vehicles, and so on. So to prepare all this, the first step is smart metering for sure, and the first step of smart metering is consumer indexing. We have to start with this, and I know it's very difficult. I had to face this difficulty when I was in India, but it has to be done. It's very, very important.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say, just a sec, we have here different representation of technologies here, and I think with some of the technologies, consumer indexing comes more or less for free. Sorry, Avana, if I say that. It's not the truth, but it is somehow built into the technology itself. And other ones have to add it. So if you have 2 different topologies, like a communication topology and of the electrical grid, then we have to merge them and we have to sync them and we have to gather that information. With other ones like PLC, we have an overlap of that both technologies. I don't know if you wanted to go into that, Avana, but
yeah, just to say that ITRAN is a 27-year-old company, okay, and all we do is power line communication narrowband. mostly for smart metering around the world in areas where the grid is terrible, no offense, okay? But it is terrible in many cases. Not so much in areas in West Europe and the United States maybe, but in Africa, in Turkey, in Russia, Ukraine, and India, of course, it is very hard to communicate over the power grid. So, but when you have a good technology, like we believe we do, and we show that it works very well in India, then the indexing and tagging, consumer indexing and tagging, comes along with the power line communication. It's kind of an output of the technology anyway, so using power line communication will solve indexing issues also.
And then you have RF mesh. So within YSUN, we use certificate-based security, so every device has a unique identity. So the problem there is tying the unique identity of the device that's authenticated to the customer and indexing that way. As you say, with PLC, you should know where it is because you should know where your power lines are, I would hope. But then, were you going to talk more about security, or?
Yes, we will talk definitely more about security.
Well, I'll leave it there for now then.
Thank you.
Perhaps a few words before going to the next question. For sure, power line is the best tool. When the quality of the network is at a high level, but for sure, if you have some issues with the network, you have to switch to RF or to cellular communication. And that's why within G3, we have developed hybrid solution based mainly on RF, but also on PLC fallback. And thanks to PLC, it's a good tool for consumer indexing and to get many information about the customer and about the network also.
Yeah, hi. Just one point, and I'm very clear that I make this statement expressing the opinions of myself alone and does not reflect the opinions of Oracle. GIS-based consumer indexing has been around for quite some time in India. Even during the APDRP phase, we had actually gone through this exercise. And I will say that this is a living exercise. It cannot stop because the public discoms in India are still growing at the rate of 3 to 5% every year, one. Point number two, it's not the technology problem. It's a combination of both technology and administrative problems, because the core difference that we see in terms of what's happening in Europe and North America and India is the number of consumers. The sheer scale that an Indian utility today has to handle. And a 2%, 3% variance there can make and mar the project. So there is quite a level of difficulty that DISCOM administrators have to face when handling this kind of a scale. Second is, I think when we structure our request for proposals, we need to be a little clear as to how we can make the administrator's life easy. It's not about technology acquisition, but more about how to drive return on investor for the administrator and for the consumer. And Rene did mention about the possibilities with a certain communication medium, which is not available in another communication medium, so to speak. But when we are structuring the RFPs on a PPP model, or as we call it, the DB foot model, we are faced with the vagaries of having multiple technologies in our technology landscape. And this problem will continue to be there, but I think with the smart meter in place, emanating signals from a particular geolocation, and our ability to build more layers into how we geofence that particular device, I think much of the issues that we have today in the country can be resolved.
Thank you very much. So thanks a lot. We were already a little bit in the technology discussion, so all the pros and cons we will hear also in the next point that this is coming up. So this is about the people who are really with the customers, so the installers who are changing meters, and we have heard it already. So this customer need to be taken along, accepting that his meter will be changed. And also the consumer indexing is one big point of it, right? So if later on some data is not wrong, so how he should trust actually his bill if you don't even know that this is his meter, or on the other side, if there is an outage and he has to call and to send that message in that he is also affected by that outage. So creating a confidence on the customer side is an extremely important point. And one point which also goes in the same direction is that the customer hopefully has to be visited only once. So that means that the installation process needs to be well structured. On the one hand side, all the administrative stuff, like he has to be informed in the best case up front, not by the one who is knocking the door, but by a letter, a message, or whatever. And the second one is that the job can be executed very fast and efficiently, and he has not to come twice. So this is actually impacting the next two of my questions, but I start with the first one. The first one is about the coordination and the training of the workforce. Also, that has an impact on the technology. So you can choose a technology which is pretty cheap in, let's say, buying licenses, buying equipment, but it's very, very hard to handle it and to maintain it outside in the field. So in certain technologies, you just can send somebody out who is mounting a device, everything is automated, he does not need to have a lot of skills to do that, maybe some certification to touch the grid, but that's it. And there are other technologies where you might have to configure the device. You need to have some skills about key handling, configuration, parameters, and maybe there are even independent devices which are related to each other, like a gateway approach. You have a meter in a gateway or concentrator or something like that. Also, therefore, a small story, and I think that is from Malta. So Malta installed a solution where they have meters and gateways, and they found out that the throughput of the team is actually too low if they have to train everybody with everything. So what was their solution? They are separating into two teams. So one team is meter installer, and the other one is the installer of the gateway. And they could train them differently. They could hire them on different skill sets. Of course, they had less people on the gateway side. So then they found out that a couple of things were not working in technology. So the success rate of connecting to the meters was pretty low. So they started to do a data analysis. Of course, the meter vendor, the poor meter vendor, was in the hell already. He got a lot of fire from the utility that this is all not working. So the data analytics showed that, strangely, all that meters which could not communicate were actually the ones which were subject to installation in the afternoon time. All the meters which were on the schedule in the morning were always working fine, afternoon not. So what happened? The workforce was paid by achieving their goals and their target. That was pressured down through the company to the different installers. And actually, the gateway installer only had to install the gateway, the meter installer only the meter. But if the gateway was not there, what should he do? So what they did in the afternoon, just to meet their timelines, was that they mounted meters, just mounted it but not configured it, and pretended the gateway was not there. So that actually impacted the whole rollout. Nobody has considered that. They were late. A huge amount of money was just wasted. So my question is here, how much do you think will that effect impact the rollout of 250 million meters in the next years in India?
I fully agree. The workforce management, the tools to the guys in the field to install the meters is key. When you want to put 1 meter in the field, it's okay. It's very easy. Anybody can do that. If you have to put in the field 10K or 30K meters per day, it's becoming a big logistic issues. And you need to have trained guys for sure, and they need to have a tool to be able to install the white meter with whatever the technology. It can be RF, PLC, cellular, and so on. You have to be sure the white meter is installed in the premises of the white customer with the good parameters. We have to be sure if it is RF or PLC, the gateway or the DCU is installed for sure. And you have to double check at the installation the connection with the central system. You have to do that immediately. And then you have to manage this connection, the connectivity in real time permanently.
Thank you. You already answered my next question.
I think the second visit to site is always ruled out. Of course, in India, the labor cost is cheap, so we usually don't think. But if you go to the rest of the world where the labor cost is very expensive, second visit to site is unaffordable. I'll give example. For example, in some of the countries, installation costs are higher than meter cost. In UK, it's a £200 installation cost, you can't afford it. And more than that, I think the important is the inconvenience to customer. Think of a dish TV or cable TV to your house coming 2 times. It's a lot of inconvenience to you. And more important, I think technology is the solution. If you, technology and process, what happened, there are 3 sides of it, people, process and technology. And in order to meet the targets, if you focus only on numbers, you will struggle. Even, for example, I give example of cellular, you may not get network, but there are technologies available where the no installation can happen and it automatically connects it. So I think the important point is installation time. So you can design your product and system that they install it smoothly and in lesser time, but at the same time, you design your system that no second visit. To ensure that it works in the first go, and that is critical to success. And I think the more important, as you said, data analysis. If somebody does data analysis on daily basis about the variability of the output of your workforce, you get a lot of clue. I can only leave hint here.
Anil, do you also want to say something about that? I think you're also facing that issue.
Actually, when we person is going to install the meter, then there is a multiple things that he is not considering. That he is in hurry to install the meter, and he is not taking care of the signals, main important function. Because the smart meter is useless unless the signal is not coming to the meter and back to the system. So the person is going to install the meter, firstly have to search the place where the signal of the communication is perfect. Secondly, he has to configure the meter with system at the time of installation. In multiple times, he found that the configuration of the with the HCS is not perfect. That means he is in hurry, so he left over for some time, or he is thinking that it will be automatically configured with the HCS system. Then, when we are going to generate bill or seeing the progress of the meter installation, then we find out that many of the consumer is not getting the bill for a long time. That in our system we find that the many of consumers are not getting the bills for the months together. Then we have analyze the how much consumer has installed the smart meter and how much consumer is not getting the bill. Then we have find the multiple number of consumers. Then we analyze one by one. Multiple type of issues is find at their places. Because this is the installation errors. That main one error is the communication error. That means the meter is not installed at the place where the signal is perfect. This is the one type of error. Second type of error, that he has not configured the meter with the system. Or you can say that the meter installed at the premises has been configured in the backend portion for the another consumer. Then there is again error. Third error is find that the consumer meter installing agency has installed the old meter and take the reading for the old meter and meter number. Then he put the meter number wrongly punch in the system or punch the reading wrongly. Then also there will be error in the billing system. So in that case also bill was not generated for the month. Similarly, if punching of the new meter is in the billing system is error defective, then also there is the error. Because this type of multiple type of error is find at the time of installation. So we have to train all the persons who is going to install the meters at the premises for all this to cater all this type of error. Presently in India, the PFC is organizing a training for all officers, even lower level officers or higher level officers, to educate the concept of the smart meter. So that when a vendor is coming to the site for installation of smart meter, then at least the person who is involved to install the meter knows that what is smart meter. Otherwise, we have the person who is at the field level is not knowing what is the smart meter. So there is multiple type of misconception is finding that places. So to cater all these things, it is the best way to educate the person who is going to install the meter, smart meter at the premises, because all this type of errors will cater in that case, and he is the person who is the contacted to the consumer at the first instance when the meter is installed, smart meter installed. So he will tell pros and cons of the smart meter to the customer. So it is very, very important to educate the person who is going to install the meter at the premises. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So Anu, maybe I can concretize the question from my side. So do you think that you will have no issues with the skilled enough people for installation in India just because of the sheer manpower you have available here?
Excellent question. Hope it's audible. Yeah. So let me put the question in a bit more perspective, what you have formulated here. See the scale. You are targeting 250 million meters in this country. And in first phase, as I understand, minimum, if we talk about, we are targeting about 100 million, if not complete 250 million. There is second phase of the program, which will come later. So I'm just trying to be very conservative. So 100 million. 100 million we are targeting in 27 months. That may be more conservative, make it 3 years, right? So basically it means about 35 million per year, which basically means 3 million per month, if my maths is right. So first of all, let's understand. It's 3 million per month, okay, which makes size of the countries, at times. That's the first thing. Now the challenge. It's okay, we have educated people a lot in this country, and we are very fortunate to have demographic dividend in this country. But still, it is quite an uphill task. When it comes to 3 million to be done, how many people you need who are reasonably skilled? Why I'm bringing it here is that what we have done so far is to be seen. We have done so far, as I believe, 5 million kind of number, right? And we have to do 3 million per month. So I'm just trying and not saying that we can't do. We have done the vaccination of COVID the best and fastest way in the world. And I'm very proud Indian in saying this. This is what we have done, so we can do it. But the preparation has to be there for that. And so you have done 5 million so far. In last many years, you have to do 3 million per month. How ready you are. And that's where the whole point of complexity comes. Here the size is complexity. And second part is the requirement of the skilled manpower. And third part, which actually we are creating difficulty for ourselves as a country, is we are breaking projects into such small projects. As I understand, in this country, we are coming out with tenders of 3 lakh, 300,000, 400,000, 200,000, 500,000. If I have a small, just in the interest of lower maths capability of myself, if I say 1 million per project, right? So you are talking about 250 projects in this country. 250 digitalization projects running on ground. So that's complexity which I think we are creating in this country. Size is the hallmark of digitalization. The volume is the hallmark of digitalization. Value of the digitalization lies in scale. Somehow we are missing the bus, as I understand in this country on this. Why I bring this here is if you have the scale per project, then your scalability of implementation would be high, skill requirement would be more synergized, and pace would be far more higher. So you have to solve the scale through the size of every project, not only for the purpose of putting the meters on the ground, but for the purpose of applications. Actually, in smart metering, the most interesting part is meter is just the start of the value chain. It is not end of it. In this country, we are still, somehow I feel a bit confused on smart metering, on installing the meter. Actually, installing the meter is the least skill activity, as I believe, in this value chain. The skill starts from their own. And then it travels through the cloud and through the applications and through the communications and through data and through many things. And finally, it reaches on a soft part, that is consumer satisfaction. I have a very small litmus test in my company on installation of smart meters. As IntelliSmart, we, along with our parent company, have done 60% of smart metering installation in this country so far. I have a small litmus test. I have said that just do the anonymous poll within the company and just check how many people say that they are ready to get the smart meter in their home. The day it is touching higher and higher than its satisfaction level you are achieving, in consumer satisfaction I was saying. So along this value chain, when it comes to installation, the scalability and the scale is very important. And there a point was made by one of the speakers. More you make it person agnostic. If you make it person based, the skill of the person, if it is important in installation of the meter, then you are gone. If scale is so high, you can't have uniformity of skill in the installers. You have to make it person agnostic. What it means, the person is just carrying the meter and he's just screwing the meter on the wall or wherever it is required to be. Rest is all digital. That's what we have done in our company. We have an app which actually starts ticking when the meter is picked by the guy. And it keeps on tapping and mapping every step of it till the time it is commissioned. Unless you do that, it is not possible. That's the, I think, trick for the speed and the scale, as I believe. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a perfect bridge to the next question, which goes in the.
For the next question, I would like to add a comment. For sure, if we want to do the rollout of 250 million smart meters, it's a huge task. We will need a huge amount of money. We will need guys in the field and whatever the technology. But all this, I think it can be managed. One thing which is very important, strategic, I think it is a customer. If we want to succeed the rollout of 250 million smart meters, it has to be accepted by the customer. The customer has to see the benefits of a smart meter. And the benefits is on the bill, the energy outage, and so on. If you don't have the customer on board, you will not succeed the rollout of 250 million smart meters. Whatever the technology, the IT system, and so on.
Very briefly on that, and that was experienced in California. When PG&E did the smart meter rollout, there was so much pushback from some communities on their smart meters for all sorts of illogical reasons as well.
So, yeah, thanks. So we have heard it now many times. The customer satisfaction is the highest thing we should reach. And then maybe afterwards there's the cost effectiveness, where you have actually your own constraints in the countries, or not the constraints other countries have. So the installation and the success of an installation and the acceptance of an installation actually depends on the efficiency, what we have heard already. And that has also some other conclusion, or comes with some other conclusions. I would like to point your attention to something what we internally call a closed loop. So that means that if somebody is on site installing the meter, he should get, in the easiest case, just the green light. The meter is connected to the backend system, and it has transferred the data. It has maybe even tried to switch the meter on and off, depending on the capabilities of the meter. And that has totally different requirements on the systems also, and also on the SLAs of the system, whereby you might have actually an on-demand meter read on an SLA level for 15 minutes, 90%, 80%, or something like that, or maybe an hour even. Such an installer cannot wait in half of the meters for 1 hour until he gets the green light. He has to get it immediately, instantaneously. So that actually requires that all this stuff is revisited again, so things like SLAs and also the technical implementation, that we can also satisfy the requirements of the installation process. So Mark, because of you, I had to answer the question myself, and then we jump into the next question. And that is now security, long awaited. Security adds a lot of complexity to the whole process. What we have seen in projects worldwide is adding security afterwards. So following the motto, okay, let's install first the happy flow, and then later on we take care of security, will not work. Security on meters and communication, as well as on the whole backend systems. So we have actually here, for example, the requirement to handle such things like keys, or later on also certificates for meters, but depending on the technology, maybe also for communication equipment. These keys are, yeah, they are keys, right? So this is like the treasure chest for everybody. So how I can protect my meter reads, how I can make people believing in the meter reads if nobody can change that. So I have to maintain these keys. So do you think that in the current programs, things like security, not only on meters but also on the backend system, is considered already with the right attention, or is there some room for improvement for the next upgrades?
I think a lot more to be done in terms of security, because security is a really critical infrastructure. Smart metering rollout is there. Imagine 50 million meters disconnected by one single command. It will be a national disaster. Whatever limited knowledge I have for Indian smart metering rollout, significant improvement in the key management and certificate management. Significant what I'm using, I'm not going into details, is required. Because, see, understand, is a key. If your keys are floating freely, you go out of your house and your keys are logged and kept somewhere where everyone can access, or you give your design of your key to your friend, it can be easily accessed. So I think it starts from manufacturing plant. How keys are generated, and how keys are handled, and how certificates are managed is the most important aspect, and it needs to be audited. In many European countries, I will give example of UK, the government does your audit, whether your processes are adequate or not. So I think the first responsibility is by design of meter manufacturing and the process of manufacturing, how you're handling key. And number two, in India is a prepayment system, believe me, and keys will become further important. Number two is the communication channel. Can I intrude in communication channel and do something? Don't believe that once meter and backend, everything is smooth in between. Somebody can snoof in it and disconnect it. Have we verified that our communication channel and technologies are robust for that point of view? And proper security. There's a NIST framework, number of frameworks are there. Have we followed, and there are national guidelines available? And the biggest security threat is your own disgruntled employees. Biggest threat of any security. Have you followed all the access processes and backend processes of your data center, your new system? I have serious concern of the security aspects. Don't take it otherwise. But we have been talking from the industry side also with the Central Electricity Authority also. We should come out with a framework at device level security, at communication security, and more important, how the process on the back end will be followed, how the right management will be done, so many things. And I think it requires a serious review. Otherwise, when 250 million meters hold out, then it will be too late. And I don't want, with the present geopolitical situation, we know how much cyber attacks takes place. This has become critical.
Yeah, I can talk about some of the rollouts which are actually happening in North America, UK also, as well as Japan. Like, they are considered to be at AMI 2.0 because they are much more advanced than where the rest of the world is at. Certificates, they are the norm. Utility infrastructure is considered to be critical. As Sanjeev talked about, one of the big challenges is that if you're talking about 50 million, talking about 10 million meters, anybody can hack into, disturb the grid, and everything is off, right? That is a national security thing. So certificates are considered to be the norm in majority of the next generation rollouts. And we feel that in India also, it needs to become a staple because you cannot assume that you are doing the rollout. It needs to be done there and then. You cannot look 3-5 years down the line and say that, oops, sorry, we actually missed it, right? Because then it's just going to be too late. The other thing I would like to actually mention here is also, we only talk about 250 million meters in India. Like, nobody realizes that you're building a network of 250 million meters. You have now a network which is actually spanning the entire country. So we expect in the next 10 years, you're going to be talking about 1 billion devices because this network is not just going to be supporting electric meters, it's going to be supporting your street lights, it's going to be supporting your gas meters, potentially water meters, all your environmental sensors. So the potential here is 1 billion plus, it's not 250 million at all. Like, we need to figure out how do you build this network and then utilize this network in the most efficient way as possible.
Thanks. I just have one point to add here. I mean, it's more or less given that cybersecurity is something that is a prime concern while we are doing the smart meter rollout. But I'll try to make this a little contextual to the RDSS program and what's happening here. Look, one of the things that we are doing, because there is a target of reaching at least the first phase of 100 million meters by a certain date, we are actually breaking this up into multiple smaller pieces that we can bite. While that definitely accelerates adoption, it also means that we are likely to have a surfeit of heterogeneous technologies and thereby potential integrations going forward within the same DISCOM. And this in turn increases the surface of attack that you would have. So sir is right that we need to have a policy governing how we use these certificates and how these systems, especially integration points, which are very vulnerable to attacks. The second thing is that we've talked about cyber attacks, what can happen, grid collapse, and so on and so forth, even outages for that matter. Let's look at the other aspect of security, which is the data privacy of the individual. You're going to have smart meters at your home, and you're going to have behind-the-meter scenarios, right? Because the DISCOM, for all you care, would want to have a 360-degree view of you as an individual, but also want to have an understanding of the disaggregated energy usage at your home. Who owns that data? Who's the custodian of the data? How is that data shared? How does it impact my privacy? And I'm going to pay, I'm a prepaid customer, I'm going to use payment gateways. So my information as a consumer is going to multiple places. So one is the GDPR part of it. The second is the cybersecurity part of it. And I think, and I know there's a national policy which is getting formulated around this. I think some of that also need to come into the RFXs that we are rolling out so that vendors and master system integrators who come and bid follow those processes. So when we are doing, like you said, ultimately it's going to be a huge network that's just not going to carry electricity, but a lot more collaborative outcomes. And when that happens, an unified policy kind of helps. Thank you.
Only one point I want to add. I think one important point you raised about data privacy. Already bill is under consideration of Parliament. Unless we design our processes, I should not have any personal information of any of my consumer on my network. And if you audit today, it's a very different story. You can get my consumers, my behavior of consumption. You know when I'm going to office, when I'm not going to office, is a personal, risk to me. But believe me, we should specify these guidelines, and whether whatever being implemented follows those guidelines. Today people can access my number, my consumption pattern, my house address, everything is accessible to everyone. This should be immediately corrected.
I will just add one comment about, on one side, cyber security and also about privacy. Two are very strategic. Why? First, an electric network is strategic for any country. Without electricity, everything is down. So, in India and in many other countries, we want to push prepaid smart metering solution. When we say prepaid, it means you have a breaker inside the meter. So you have to connect, disconnect remotely the customer according to the account. It means if a hacker enters the system, he will be able perhaps to disconnect a big part of the country. And when you are a DSO, it can be a disaster. So it's very, very important. When you have a prepaid solution, you have money, you transfer money. So you are connected to the banking system and so on. And it's very, very strategic, and you have for sure to have a high level of security. So it's very important, and it's probably the most important point, far beyond the technology of communication and so on.
So maybe here I can also add some small story, because we have a very, very unsuccessful rollout in Germany. Actually, there's no rollout at all yet, because we have the best security. So we have designed a system. We are really good in designing systems in Germany, and also in over-designing systems we are really good. And this is a very great example. So just to protect everyone, everyone gets nothing. And that is actually the balance, actually, which is really hard to meet, right? That we are not building the house and we are closing the door with stones because we're afraid somebody would come in. No, we need to have the right measures to have the people and the guests in our house eating with us. And that is a very, very, very tough job.
But only authorized guests are allowed, not unauthorized guests to your house.
Yeah, yes. The problem also is that that maybe who is not my friend today will be my friend tomorrow, and that we also have in this context here. So we don't know who will make something great for our customers out of the data which are in the system. So we need to be prepared to also share and to invite other ones to the system, but in a controlled manner. So that is a absolutely great challenge, and one of the measurements actually we can have, so how secure a system is. And I have to say, to be honest, from what I have seen so far in the projects in India, security is actually not on the level where it should be in terms of the rollout, right? And here the warning again, if you start rolling out, you will not change your rollout scheme, you will not add security, because it's impossible to maintain what is already installed. So better get it right first, have a look on the right things to get it established before you're rolling out. And the second one, which is also a lessons learned, if security meets comfort, comfort always wins. So if somebody has an easier way to work when he's bypassing security, he will do it, despite all the risks. That goes especially to the last topic of the installers, of the workforce. So if they have keys and they can do something with it which makes their life easier, they will do it. And that is, by the way, also something what we have learned on the customer side. Even the customer is doing the same. So even we are protecting him as much as we can, There will be the point where he gets a nice offer from somewhere to connect the device to the cloud. If that is possible, he will do it without thinking about it, because it's much more comfortable for him to get the data from maybe somewhere else. So that leads to my next question. Actually, from the ones who have witnessed a rollout. So what do you think should be a real KPI of a successful rollout? Is that just the number of connected meters?
I'll just reply because this is my favorite topic. I think one difference from the rest of the world, India is 100% prepayment compared to the rest of the world. So for me, data collection will not be a big challenge. With a different combination of technology and with the learning, we'll be able to do it. I've been tracking few countries, and I think the important is the top-up success. If, imagine, your top-up success is 97%, 98%. In some of the developed world, I afford 94%. Then you have nightmare. You cannot afford a consumer who have paid you money and is disconnected. And I can tell you in advance, this is a huge risk. So I think the biggest success will be, somebody told consumer satisfaction, I think he told. A lot of customer instance will start developing the moment you disconnect consumer who paid it, because we are in the initial phase of rollout. So data collection and SLA with plus minus 1-2% will happen. The biggest successful will be not you and me all sitting here. Moment consumer says, consumer sitting in a village, okay, I can buy electricity without any hassles, and it is not disconnected. Number two, our customers, I mean from industry side, customers can make use of data in a simple way and make, see, simple. How much, even if say 9,000, 10,000 rupees per point. India's per capita consumption is X unit. Unless whatever incremental cost we are putting to smart meters, we as an industry don't give return to our customer, because we have one customer sitting here. Many of customers are sitting here. By use of data, not only from revenue protection, because right now highlight is revenue protection. EVs are coming, PVs are coming. We have a huge amount of data of smart metering. We don't know what to do, even today. If the data is not used for the network management, in addition to revenue protection, we'll be making big mistake. So for satisfaction, I think consumer is the one, and utilities are second. This technical stuff will happen. May take 4 months to stabilize, 4 months, 3 months to stabilize. What has done it? Why should we can't do it? I think the critical is the consumer, and India is a prepayment, believe me. It will be challenging if you don't make it right.
Let me add a bit more interesting facts to what my friend Sunil has said. No, he said it's all prepayment. Yes, it is prepayment. It's not normal prepayment. I'll tell you what it is. In Bihar, we have customer base of 120,000 customers as of now who have the smart meters. Not actually 120,000, it's 1.2 million, sorry. It's 1.2 million customers who are on prepaid smart metering in Bihar. Any guesses, and certainly there'll be prize if it's guessed, how many disconnections and reconnections happen per month? It is more than 1.2 million. It is more than 1.2 million per month disconnections on a customer base of 1.2 million. That is the infra robustness. And then you have to deliver what Sunil said, consumer satisfaction. Because if the customer has paid the money and the power is not restored, and your loss is in terms of KPI 1%, it makes 12,000 customers. And 12,000 customers are very well connected politically if they are not connected electrically. And it's not fun, let me tell you, it's a real life I'm living. I'm living this life every month, and it's happening. Again, believe it, it's really happening and it's being done. That's what KPI, what my friend Rene said, is what you can deliver in this kind of requirements. And whether it is wrong, it is not. You promised me that I can recharge at any point in time. I had only 20 rupees in my pocket. I recharged it. Then what? You have to, if you disconnect, I'll recharge again after 2 days, again with 50 rupees. And the minimum ticket size of recharging is rupees 10 in this country. So, you have 10 rupees, You can charge your 2 units, consume it for 2 hours, relax. Again, recharge. You are free. Nobody will come and ask, why did you? That's what you have to deliver in case you want to deliver KPIs in this country. Yeah.
I can add only one point. I think it's not a problem of India, let me tell you. I will not name the country, one country where they're implementing prepayment. They are struggling in second phase. First phase, they were very successful to top up the prepayment meter because of the meter and communication challenges. Meter from someone, communication from someone. And this country is where the first phase, they had the same supplier. There was no problem. In second phase, when they started separate hub and separate meter, the people for the prepayment supplier, retailers, say, we will not move to the second phase because tokens are not going. And we can't afford, in our country, he said 1.2 million connection. If one disconnection happen in Europe, it's not desirable, and person is on dialysis, you are gone as a retail business. Your regulator will be after your blood. So I think the important point is system designing. My request to all designers here or implementer here, speed is important. I am not against speed. Have we re-engineered processes? My big concern, we are running the old 1980-95 processes and implementing prepayment. Have we implemented, re-engineered our processes properly, including payment gateways? Otherwise, we will struggle in the country.
No worries. I mean, I just had one point there with regards to the topic of discussion here. And I believe that at this point in time, the KPIs today have to be a little more broad-based than just looking at reducing the SES ARR gap or just the revenue protection. And actually, if you look at the construct of the MISP RFX, the number of channels today that we are actually capturing has the room and the foresight to get those parameters into first the HES and then on to the meter data management software. Thereby, we can drive efficiencies either in your power purchase agreements that you have, or in your demand response, or being able to drive an energy efficiency program. Because we all, as consumers, are equally in the game as the DISCOM operator in terms of driving energy efficiencies. But today, like Anilji has also said, that everything is geared towards revenue protection, and rightfully so, because the aggregated technical and commercial loss is pretty high for the country, and getting it down to manageable levels of 7 to 9% is a gargantuan task that we have. On the prepaid front, I think we need not worry too much, because we also have the experience of the telecom sector in the country, which is managing prepaid. Yes, there are life-threatening situations. Somebody is on a dialysis, that can happen. I mean, today we have more telecom connections in the country than we have toothbrushes. So I think there is there's a lot of information that we can get from the telecom industry, which we can imbibe in the way we drive the prepaid situations. Yes, customers are a very important stakeholder in the entire process, and if the customer is not getting the benefit, obviously there would be situations of severe customer dissatisfaction. But I think one thing that you're going to, in my experience that I have seen with regards to KPI, if we just limit our KPIs to revenue protection, I think it's not a bad approach, because there's so many problems that we have, because it's important to take them phase-wise. But then, we shouldn't be capturing so many channels. Today, when I'm doing the sizing for a particular meter, the number of channels that I have to handle versus the number of channels that I have to handle in AMR 2.0 countries like Japan is just twice. Why? Because if I capture that data, I've got to store it somewhere, right? Just because there's a public cloud available, just by storing it there doesn't solve the purpose. One, I need to pay for that data because data costs, right? And second, am I able to monetize the data now? Or am I going to monetize all this data maybe in the second phase? So maybe a little bit of retrospection into the way we are managing the number of channels and then managing the KPIs phase-wise can help make life easier for both the operator, the EPC vendor, as well as the technology solution providers.
Thank you. And I think we hold that for a moment because we're coming back to exactly that point in one question.
As time is running, so I will be short and I will say the same thing. On one side, the first key point regarding KPI is customer satisfaction. If you have one issue with one customer, it can be a disaster for the next steps. And on the other side, what is very important is money. It's revenue protection for the DISCOM. It's a business case of the solution.
Okay, so I think the discussion shows how broad this KPI thing is. And KPI is key performance indicator, just to translate it again. So that is actually, do we get out what we want, or is that the maximum what we can get out of that project? So actually the return on investment on all these huge investments, and this is one of the biggest investments actually countries do, is the smart meter rollout. And there are also other benefits which have not been mentioned, so I really appreciate that the end user, the customer is so centric here in India. That is not everywhere the case. In the most of the projects all around the world, the first question I'm asking when we are invited to present something is, why do you do that project? And then the technical team is saying, because we want to implement smart metering. So yeah, of course, but why? And they cannot answer it. And that's actually the job of everybody who is leading such a project, implementing such a project in the utility, to make also the technical team aware why they are doing it. And of course, I would love to see also that KPIs even in tenders. I've not seen a single one which is talking about more than connectivity ratios and the time actually you are executing, we call that a DCT, so a command which is going down to the meter. But why? Nobody knows. And that's why actually they can also not judge, they can also not help actually to come up with better solutions. For example, instead of being very fast in executing a command, the prioritization of commands can be the solution in certain technologies. So that leads me to a next point, which I wanted to discuss a little bit broader, but we have not enough time left. So I wanted to talk about the SMOC, the Meter Operation Center, or the Smart Meter Operation Center. Here's also, actually we are not operating meters. We have heard we are operating maybe the biggest network which will exist in the country. Right? And it will not be smaller than mobile communication networks, because one is for sure, we have much more devices, general devices, which will be connected in future than what we have on mobile phones. So not only that utilities in the future become, they are still the backbone of a society, they are also operators of really, really huge communication networks, and that requires a lot of skills and also rethinking. So my proposal would be also to even think about a different name for a smart meter operation center and include all that what we had now as KPIs into that. So maybe a customer satisfaction center, or how we want to call it. So back to the discussion, Subrata has already started, and that's actually one of my beloved topics, and that is flexibility. So for everybody, it must be clear that we are implementing something now which should work in 10 or 15, maybe even longer, more years, where we will be faced with totally different challenges. So we are doing an investment now, and that investment needs to be protected by being flexible to react to do the challenges we might not see, or we see on the horizon and we say, okay, no, we don't touch that one now, it's too complex. You cannot correct it later on, for sure not. If the meters are out and you need to have in the future maybe 10 registers because you are, or 10 channels, right, transferred to the back end because solar is coming in, rooftop solar, you have to compensate the customers for the payment. So you need to maybe double the channels, but your communication network cannot do it. Done, game over. So your investment has to be replaced by a new investment, which is making that happen. That is not happening. I mean, Sweden had that, right? One rollout replaced after 10 years by the next rollout because they could only deal with 2 values every hour. Introducing flexible tariffs where they wanted to introduce the customer to really consume the energy when they had renewables available, actually made the customer extremely angry because afterwards, looking at the bill, nothing was reflected. They just got the flat tariff invoiced. So being prepared for the future is a key aspect, and that actually hits the meter, communication network, back-end storage of data. So how to deal with this flexibility?
You first said meter, let me start from meter itself. I think the most important is while designing the meter, changes will happen. Tariff will change, OTA will happen rapidly. And if you don't design selection from processor to memory to your everything, and how you implement your protocols, you will have a nightmare, I can tell you. One simple example, if you're not designing your meter for a proper OTA, you will face music. India, one big challenge you have is a power fail-safe. While doing OTA, your power may go off. And then what happens to your program? So my request to those sitting from meter designer point of view, think meter how it will work for 10 years. Don't do cost cutting here from the designing point of view. Selling is your decision. But if you don't design your processor, don't design your everything architecture, and it's not a OTA-able. OTA means even when power goes, it happens. No memory corruption. You will have a nightmare. I can only tell them that much. And how you implement protocols.
Sorry, one little bit challenging for you. So there are of course, I mean, there are of course things which you can solve with configuration possibilities on the meter, right? On the protocol, you can activate, deactivate channels. But linking that to the topic of security, I know that implementing...
I think security you have to design from the basics also.
Exactly.
Because
you need to.
I strongly believe key handling in the field is not a desirable situation to be. Manufacturer has to design complete architecture so that it is while designing it, is a foolproof. Otherwise, we are in great risk. And what we have done so far, we have a great risk. I only can say that.
So I can say from the comms side, one of the biggest challenges we are seeing across the globe is proprietary solutions. So our request would be that start with standards-based technologies, else you're going to run into vendor lock-in. You have to look at 5-10 years down the line when you are in the 11th year and the utilities are actually putting in tenders. It's not going to be a greenfield deployment. It's a greenfield deployment right now. You can do whatever you want, but then it's going to be a brownfield deployment, which means that the next solution needs to interoperate both with the previous one as well as with the next one. Because you can't expect that you're going to rip apart the 1 million meters today and then start a new deployment. So that's why I think standards-based is the way to go. North America is running into huge problems. They are a decade late. All the next generation deployment supports both the forward-looking as well as the backwards-looking, which means that if they want to be fully interoperable, it's going to take them another 10 years to make that happen. So you have vendor lock-in, which means that 2 companies own 70 to 80% of that market. So it's very hard for the new vendors to actually come in and come up with innovative solutions. So that actually drives, that doesn't drive innovation, right? That drives, I would say, how should I call it? Monopoly, basically.
Yes, if you want to operate a smart metering system for 10 years or more, you will need to have smart meters in the field. So interoperability is key for sure. But what is also very important is the possibility to upgrade the IT system, the IT solution, to upgrade remotely the firmware of the meters which are already in the field. If you cannot do that, you will be dead very rapidly.
Yeah, I'll again, bring everybody back to the fact that, I'm sorry, did I speak over somebody?
Just go ahead.
Yeah. Just want to bring everybody back onto the context, and this is the context of RDSS in the country. And one of the reasons why we are actually reposing our faith in an AMISP is that we are hoping that the DISCOMs are able to focus on their core competencies and not manage the vagaries of managing an IT infrastructure. One point of concern that we have is it's now almost widely accepted that a platform approach to innovation is important. Yes, it is important, but having multiple platforms doesn't solve the problem, because these platforms need to talk to each other and at every point of integration, it's an added pressure on the system in terms of overheads, in terms of response and throughput performances, and then obviously the data glut. The other thing is, like say for example, the largest discom in the country, UPPCL, 30 million consumers, and then that's divided into multiple revenue circles. And we're just talking about where things could possibly improve. I think the proof of the pudding would be when each of these revenue circles reach a critical mass of 5 million meters and all the 20 channels start hitting the database. And you need to understand, drive analytics about the customer, do remote connect, disconnect, and perform VE processes over, let's say, 20 million consumers. Then how many of these heterogeneous technologies are actually going to show up in good light is going to be a question, which brings me back to an associated topic, is that the benchmarking, yes, of course, it has to be standards-based, I agree with you. But the current benchmark processes that we have set for ourselves is not built for scale. In a test environment, I can have 20 meters connected and we can drive the necessary outcomes. 1 million meters, 2 million meters, 10 million meters. I think CPRI has the brains trust to drive those benchmarks, and let's get it out there. We are a country of 1.4 billion. We have driven the COVID vaccination, and let us not forget the UIDAI a few years back. Mammoth exercises. I think we are better placed if we are able to drive benchmarks for these multimeter rollouts right now.
So I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things that Mark and Abhijit said. So first of all, there will be a requirement to do over-the-air upgrades, and they need to be done securely, and that might be done, unfortunately, for bug fixes, but it could also bring feature enhancements. So from that point of view, you obviously need security, and you need a network that is capable of supporting that amount of data traffic as well, which is going to go on. We probably aren't fully aware of all the applications that you're going to want to be able to run in 10 years' time. There's certainly silicon that is providing lots of raw data and lots of raw data capability, which brings back that point of what do you do with all of this data? The ideal thing is to process it locally and use the useful information to do something immediately, which gets over the data storage problem and to some extent the privacy problem of what are you doing with stored data. So, and that starts getting very interesting. We've been talking about meters, but meters are the first part of this. The next part is how do you optimize grid management for things like outage management, fault var management, which brings about cost reduction. It also helps include DER, so distributed energy resources on the network. There is, as Abhijit mentioned, there are US utilities now that are, they did their first smart meter rollout, and now they're realizing that they want more out of this because they want to control renewables that they've put onto the grid. So I think designing the network to support multiple applications, to be So you don't design the network for the application, you design it to transport data securely, have support for end-to-end peer-to-peer security, which comes to your point previously, because there will be different stakeholders requiring different data traversing the same network. So I think all of those things are valuable, and as you know, and most people here know, I'm an advocate of open standards-based solutions, because the standards organizations take a long-term view about evolution of the technology rather than step changes, so you can evolve it.
Yes, first of all, I wanted to say a few things. Of course, the security is a very important issue and should be done quickly, but like René said, in Germany it killed the installation because they needed too much security. We have to give up something. Regarding the installation and what was talking about here, like it was said before, the installer should do a very simple job. It should be automated and should be used very good technologies in order to survive the installation, even if it does a lot of mistakes. Regarding standards, I want to say a few words because I have a lot of experience with standards. As I said, I'm 27 years in this space. We've gone through HomePlug, we've gone through G3, we've gone through Prime, we've gone through SSP of Microsoft, we've gone through standards in Japan, standards in Korea, everywhere. Okay? The standard committees it's a very good idea, okay? Everybody wants to have a standard. Interoperability for meters, it's not like interoperability for example, for my cell phone, okay? If I go from Israel to here, I need my cell phone to work here. It doesn't matter for the meter, he needs to talk to his neighbor or to the concentrator. It's not that important that it really is so interoperable. And in these standard committees, there are a lot of forces, and you probably know the story about the DLMS and the fights around the DLMS, where the people want the DLMS, but the big guys didn't want that the protocol will not control the market here, okay? And what happens with these committees, because they're a big player, everybody wants to have his share in the standard, okay? And at the end of the day, the committee compromise on the technology. So you get everybody's share, but the technology is not that great, okay? In case of, instead of everybody come together, look at the best technology, get the license, whatever, and just agree on having a good technology out there, you get technologies that are a compromise. Now, I'm not involved in solar so much, or in cellular, sorry, but I can just imagine that the problem that we have with receiving the voice and saying, look, go to the other side, you're disconnected, and that, this come from some of the compromises I think that these companies had to make. So the standards, a lot of the time, are the big companies play, and they don't pick up the best technology. So just my 2 cents after 27 years.
Okay, Phil, just a moment. I knew that would be a hot topic here in this group of speakers. That's why it was also my last question I had on the list. So how much standardization we really need? I think mobile industry is not a good example. I mean, US is all only proprietary, not really interoperable. Europe showed it is possible. So there are always, bless you, there are always some pros and cons in it. And of course, if you want to be future-proof, you might need it, the interoperability. But if you want to be on the edge of the technology, maybe standardization is not the right thing. I think, Phil, you have a clear opinion about that.
Oh, yeah. I could talk for hours on this.
We have not so much time.
I know, and maybe we will. So I'm not sure I agree about the cellular industry, in that if you go back 15 years, there were proprietary technologies everywhere, and it was driven by the consumer for international global roaming. because people didn't want to have to rent a cell phone. People started traveling, they didn't want to go to Japan and have to rent a cell phone, or the US and rent a cell phone. And up until not that long ago, there were 2 standards in Japan, and many Japanese people had 2 cell phones. So I think one of the things that the user did was drive the need for global roaming. And if you look at the number of modulations there are in a LTE phone nowadays, it's huge. And all of that is put in one piece of silicon, and some of it's enabled when you move somewhere and some of it's not. So I think that's a justification for standardization, and it was driven by the user. I think picking up on your point about standards, totally agree with you, and that's why there has become a requirement. Standards don't mean interoperability. And maybe standards aren't always the optimum solution, but they bring a whole load of other benefits with them that I think are valuable. And you know, we all use cell phones, we all use Wi-Fi every day of our lives. We expect it to work wherever we go. We expect it to provide multi-service for us in an enterprise and individual environment. It's not perfect for the utility industry, however. So I think there are needs for standards. I don't think there is one standard that solves everybody's problems, however. So I think it's up to the standards organizations and the industry alliances to collaborate with the customers to deliver what the customer needs.
On the DSO perspective, for sure, you need a standard, you need an open solution. Which one is the best on the technical point of view, I don't know. But what is very important for a DSO is to be able, for the 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, to be able to find products with a backward compatibility with the existing products in the field. It can be G3, it can be RF, it can be cellular, but you invest a lot of money. 250 million smart meters is a huge amount of euros or rupees or US dollar. So you have to be sure to be able to operate your solution on the long term.
So one thing I can actually talk about standards is that it just depends, like when you look at standards, like where do you actually stop? Like Wi-Fi has been extremely successful. It's not doing anything on the application layer, right? What it gives you a pipe to go from A to B, B to C. So I think that's one of the things we need to actually also look at, like what are the standards really bringing to the table? Like interop is one of the big things, and for us, and the way I look at it, Wi-Fi has been hugely successful. It gives the consumer, it gives the customer, it gives the app developer to do whatever they want as far as the application layer goes. It gives you the ability to move the data from point A to point B. And that's one of the reasons that, you know, Phil is here also. We talk a lot about Wyson. Silicon Labs is on the Wyson board of directors also. So Wyson is very similar to Wi-Fi. It allows you to push the data from point A to point B. You can put whatever application layer you want on that. I think so that's the flexibility we are looking at too. Now, there are standards which actually give you the application layer capability too, but then those standards keep on evolving a lot because as the consumer is evolving, as the industrial sector is actually evolving, the applications change, which means that that standard needs to evolve also because it has the application layer as a part of its standards-based process.
Okay, I think that was a very good point. So the level of standardization is important. So sometimes you would wish that it's not so high up, so that you have a little bit more flexibility. Sometimes you would like to have something more integrated, like all the security layers, so that you can easily connect one device into a network. It doesn't matter if that is a wireless network or a PLC network, to create that interoperability. And of course, it's also very, very important for the utilities at the end to be able to source it from different sources, especially in the context of India, where you have to produce so many meters which cannot be covered by a single manufacturer. Even he can do it, I would never do it because it's an extremely high commercial risk to put all your eggs into one basket. That we have seen, and nobody knows what will be the impact factors, like COVID, which had an impact on the chip availability because of the limited capacity in China, which has then an influence on the logistic cost, which tripled suddenly. So all your business case will be destroyed if you have not a couple of sources for it. And the basis for it is standardization, I think.
I'll just add a few sentences to, and this is pure Indian context of the program. So our utilities are moving from EPC kind of model to TOTEX kind of model or DBFOT model, which is more ownership based, and ownership for 10 years is with the developer. So our utilities are too used to holding everything very close to their heart, leaving nothing to be done by the contractor or developer. Probably there has been culture of having very closely defined things. That has gone into the OPEX or TOTEX mode also. Micro specification to the extent of listing out the manufacturers is also there in our system, which actually leaves no scope for innovation, as rightly brought out. But over and above that, we have another issue which is very unique, is over-testing. So our bidding model refers to 5% sample testing of the meters, but interestingly leaves onto distribution utility to increase it as desired. And many utilities are there which have found it to take to 100%. Because they desire 100% meter to be tested again. Means that's the quantum of extreme specification and testing, which actually would be counterproductive in this process. There are already about 5 million meters which have been bid out, tendered out, and are asking for 100% testing. I am very sure utilities would withdraw this later on because they cannot test and install in those 27 months if they happen to do, because there is no testing facility. This is after the BIS testing, after the acceptance testing, after the basic testing. This is separate testing which DISCOM utilities want to run. That's where we sometimes confuse the accuracy, reliability with the excessive overbearance of system specification and testing. That's what's happening in current situation in India. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So I think that was a quite interesting discussion. Thanks a lot. It was very active. I really enjoyed it. I hope you too. I would like to ask Manoj to close the session, maybe with some closing remarks. Okay, good. Then I will do it. So we have not a lot of time, so don't be afraid. It will be quite short. So we have discussed a lot of stuff. We were for a certain time on the technology side, but I'm really happy that most of the time we stayed outside of really technology discussion, because that is really where the music plays. Also from my experience, I'm normally trying to bring it really to the point. I have not seen a single project which was failing because of the wrong technology or the wrong meter chosen or whatever. So the failure is always somewhere else, and that needs to have attention. And a lot of these points we have discussed quite broadly today from totally different perspectives, which makes this interesting. And it also shows that there is no right or wrong. Depending where we are in the project, depending what we want to achieve, we have to make decisions where we know actually that to a certain extent they're wrong. Hopefully, to the bigger extent they're right, and that is actually what I wish everybody who is involved in the projects in India, that he is more on the right side than on the wrong side, and then it will be an extremely challenging and also prospective future here for the industry. Thanks a lot for listening in and spending so much time with us in this session.
Thank you, Mr. Reni, for your moderating this session, and thank you everyone for sharing your insightful knowledge and valuable contributions. Now I would like to invite Mr. Reni to hand over the token of appreciation to our panelists, starting with Mr. Anil Raval. Next, Mr. Mark. Mr. Yogesh Kumar. Mr. Phil Beecher. Mr. Abhijit Grewal. Mr. Avener. Avener. Mr. Avener. Avner. Mr. Sunil Singhvi. Mr. Suprada Das. Mr. Manoj Sharma. Now I would request Mr. Rezi Kumar Pillai to hand over the token of appreciation to our moderator, Mr. Reni. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
May I request all panelists to stand for a group photo. Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all the speakers and delegates present here over for this session, AMI Advanced Applications. Now I would like to invite our chair for this session, Mr. Saurav Shaha. He is the Executive Director at Power Finance Corporation Limited. Welcome you, sir. May I invite moderator for this session, Ms. Deepti V. Dutt. She is a Head Strategic Initiatives Public Sector at AWS. Welcome you, ma'am. May I invite our speakers for this session, starting with Mr. Manoj Kare, Managing Director, Chhattisgarh State Power Distribution Company Limited. May I invite Mr. Cedric Lavenu, Research Engineer at EDF and Chair of G3 Alliance Technical Working Group. Welcome you, sir. May I invite Vijay Panpalia. He is a AVP Product Engineering SCW. May I invite Ajay Kumar Sharma. He is a Senior Vice President BSES Rajdhani Power Limited. Welcome you, sir. May I invite Mr. Yogesh. He is a CEO at K Greens. Welcome you, sir. May I invite Mr. Paresh Patel. He is a CEO and President at System Level Solutions. Welcome you, sir. May I invite Mr. Ramana Rao Elchuri. He is a Vice President, Sales and Business Development at Canod. Welcome you, sir. Synod. Yes, sir. May I invite Mr. Ashish Sahai. He is a Country Manager and Sales Director at Wirepass. Welcome you, sir. Now I am handing over this session to Ms. Deepti Dutt to take the forward the session. Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. And I do realize that this panel is standing between you and the evening drinks. And it's interesting that, Ashish, you had to play the musical chair and get a chair yourself. My brief to all the panelists has been that how can we keep this little light, conversational and humorous so that we ensure that the audience stays engaged and they don't leave in between leaving because of the boring conversation. So let's try and make it as interesting and, as conversational as possible. So thank you everyone for joining here. Saurav, I'd like to start with you, to set the context and your thoughts. We heard in the previous session people talk about the current AMI rollout that's happening in the country, 250 million smart meters, a very ambitious project. You have been at the helm of RDSS, which is focusing on this as a big area. And now we're talking about what advanced applications, what new can be done on top of that. So your thoughts, your perspective, which sets the context for the rest of this conversation, please.
Thank you, Deepti, and a very good afternoon to everyone here for this panel, all my co-panelists and members of the audience. So right before we had the earlier session which related to the AMI rollout and 250 million meters. So this is a natural corollary as to, what happens once we have these meters in place. About the movement in meter placement. So in the last 1.5 years, since the scheme was launched and this entire design and idea of having 250 million, we have had some experience in the previous schemes, IPDS and in the other government schemes of some smart meters, but whatever has been the findings, they have been fairly exciting with the kind of loss reduction and also the possibility of running analytics, for which we are at a very nascent stage because we haven't really harnessed the kind of data prospects that come out of these numbers. These are just huge numbers and probably it has never, it has not happened really anywhere in any kind of utility space, not just power. So we are looking at the next 1 year, 1.5 years, where a majority of these tenders will be in the award stage, and post-award stage, the implementation starts. That is when we start getting the initial volume of data. The first 100 million out of these are the most critical meters because they'll almost cover 70 to 80%. So when we look at 250 million, it is not a monolith. It can be seen in two packages of 100 million and 150 million. The first 100 million will cover all the commercial consumers, industrial consumers, government consumers, high volume residential consumers, urban consumers, high loss area consumers. So the first 100 million meters will be critical, both in the sense of how utilities perceive this to be a business case, and also how, the kind of consumer experience that happens. So we have seen analytics in many industries. In some places, it's more of a system level analytics. In some industries, it's more of a user level analytics. Here, we will see a play of both user level and system level, starting from energy accounting. At this point in time, all our energy accounts are made of various source data. We hope, as we have more system metering, DT feeder boundary, we'll have a comprehensive database and also analytics as to change in usage patterns, better demand forecasting, micro demand forecasting, which will be supplemented by the user level data. And the user level data will work both ways. For the DISCOM end as to the DISCOM profitability, viability, and also the user experience and user interaction with the grid, especially when we have time of day tariff and the user starts making choices about the usage of electricity and the time of electricity. So we have, I won't stop you, there are a lot of panelists and all of them have separate perspectives, and Deepti has already collected the information that she already has the right questions. So I'm sure, as we go ahead, we'll get to know what they are planning and what, what else, they would want from government, or what probably they could suggest to the government on the smart metering program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for sharing the roadmap that, how you're looking at first 100 million of high impact and then the rest 150 million. And as you mentioned, it's a very interesting panel that we have. Ajay, who represents a DISCOM, actually owning end-to-end, implementation and field operations. And then we have members here, Ashish, Paresh, who come from very interesting unified, the way they're looking at unified communication, specializing in that area. Cedric, also who represents EDF and a lot of system integration experience, not just in India, but globally as well. Ramana, who comes from Cynconode and actual meter, communication and meter and edge connectivity and things like that. So we'll talk about that. Yogesh comes from cybersecurity background, and Vijay, he's deeply involved in, customer engagement, workforce mobility, and things like that. So an interesting mix of panel that we have, people representing very varied ideas. So, I'll start and, I'll be going around the panel asking each panelist a different kind of a question. And my request would be that if you can take about 4 to 5 minutes to address this, answer each of the question. So probably we have some time for second round as well. So Ajay, I'll start with you. You're one of the first ones to start thinking about not just smart meter implementation, but also SMOC, Smart Metering Operation Center. It was talked about briefly in the previous session as well. So wanted to understand your perspective on, what are the current challenges that you think SMOC will address? What's the right way to build a SMOC center, and how do you really see that shaping up?
Yeah, thank you, Dipti, and good afternoon to all. So, when we say Smart Meter Operation Center, it has to be a command center sort of thing for the entire AMI project, and it has to be designed and conceptualized in a manner where we can have the data sanctity checkings or monitorings right from the field to its operation. SMOC being a sort of command center at the center place, it has to serve two different distinct things. One, it has to monitor the entire operation and the deployment of such a large project. And when in operation, it has to present key issues or events or KPI-based, management dashboards where all the key SLAs can be monitored and corrective actions can be initiated. So the kind of structure currently in circulation, I believe that the SMOC structure is not properly defined in there. And maybe going forward, some improvisation has to happen in that. Because right now, the object of loss reduction for the DISCOMs, it has to be substantiated with the advanced data analytics and other layer of business intelligence. And SMOC being a key figure in basically channelizing the value-added services to consumer, to DISCOM officials, to different stakeholders to monitor and take corrective actions. So this has to be an integral part of the entire solution. One more important thing here, like maybe in next 2-3 years, there would be large-scale implementation and installations across Indian states. After that, the focus would shift definitely on the value-added services, and AMI being a basic backbone of the entire energy management for the DISCOMs. It has to be routed through some centralized command center and other applications which will drive the DR management and energy transitioning solutions. They would also be incorporated at a central command center. So this is how since I have been in this program last 4 or 5 years, and I had a good opportunity to start it initially in 2017, and I've seen almost 2.5 million meter installation across different states of India. So all these operational and deployment challenges, they have their own solutions, and through SMOC we can drive all these things, right? So that's what it has to be, and properly incorporated maybe in the current structure of SBD itself. But even if it is not there, maybe going forward, the utilities need to build upon this kind of solutioning to monitor this kind of a large deployment. Thank you.
Thanks, Ajay. You know, what I notice, what I note take away from what you said is a couple of things. I think you talked a lot about command control being riding on data analytics is what you alluded to, that so much of data that gets generated through so many systems, how do you bring it all together? I think second key point was it's an evolving scope. You know, we really don't know what SMOC is going to look like in future. Will that only be for smart meters, or will it be overall DISCOM systems getting monitored through a common command control center? So that in turn leads to the agility that is required in building it, the ability to experiment and, you know, do innovations on top of that. So yeah, how do we really ensure that we start off in a manner on a platform that allows us to bring in all these agility and flexibility and being able to scale. So thanks, Ajay, for sharing that. Ashish, I'll move to you. You know, communication is perhaps one of the biggest field level challenge that we see in smart metering rollout, right? Can you share with us what are the innovations that you're seeing emerging in wireless communication and unified communication area, and what future plans do you think is really going to help us scale up this entire initiative?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Coming to the communication, I would be speaking more on behalf of I would say that on the RF communication, yeah. And I certainly feel that for wireless connectivity, RF communication is way to go, at least for India. Other technologies would have been successful elsewhere, but then the Indian topology is slightly different. And for India, I feel RF is the way to go. On RF side, I think both, even Ramna is sitting next to me, he would agree that there has been successful projects, and in terms of innovation, I think even our competition and us, both of us are innovating. We are innovating in terms of non-cellular 5G, which is a next grade of data connectivity. They are also innovating in terms of a lot on the head-end system, which is a unified head-end system, and a lot of other things. Yeah. There's similarly one thing which is lacking holistically is a futuristic network management tool. Because in the communication, what we are doing right now is more of a informing as to what has happened. Yeah, there's no predictive analysis or analytics which happens. Yeah, and this can be done through a effective network management. But then that's something which I feel is certainly lacking at the moment, and it would be obligatory on both the wireless providers or any other for that matter, that a predictive analysis is also provided on the network management side. So I have a feeling that with these things and with time as it goes, there could be a lot of, I think even in RF communication, we have all the tools and both of us have all the tools available for a fast deployment or effective deployment. We have already shown it in the industry. So I feel that, yeah, the innovations could be on the network management side and technologically on the 5G mesh, which is coming as an innovation.
Thank you. You know, Paresh, I'll continue this topic with you, and given your international experience, you've been part of Finland and UK rollouts. Yeah. So can you provide some insights on similar things, challenges that you might have seen there, innovations that have happened there? You know, Ashish talked about the entire network monitoring that is required. So did you come across such challenges and some innovation that were done there? And how much of that you think would be applicable to India? How do we make sure we realize those innovations in India?
Sure, thank you. I think the Finland and UK, they're two separate things, as well as India. Right now, when you look at Finland, how many meters have they installed? 3.7 million. India, we're talking, you know, across years. In India, we're talking about 3 million per month. right? And then in the UK, there's something like 40 million meters that are being installed. So each country has its own set of issues and problems, but I guess the unifying thing across those countries, and India as well, is that the applications that are going to be used for the data that we're collecting for this, from metering, is for demand-side management and also customer engagement. And in the last meeting, or the last session, you know, there was about a bunch of talk about customer engagement and and the customer in Finland is different than a customer in UK versus a customer in India, right? So each one has its own localized set of applications that are used. And on all of this, as rightly everybody here has pointed out, data is the key. And why is Amazon sitting here? Right? So, you know, that data needs to be stored somewhere and basically visualized and using AI, ML, analytics, doing all sorts of business intelligence. So, you know, if you look at the applications that were in Finland and in UK, one of the things was to verify power outages and provide service restoration. The other one was remote disconnect and reconnect. The other one was to transmit basically demand response messages and load management messages. And I guess there are about 6 or 7 of them. I'll go through each one of them. The other one is to basically integrate control and integrate basically control and command systems for distribution equipment. And then to facilitate prepaid metering. There's energy desegregation. I hope everybody knows what energy desegregation is, where you can, instead of sampling every 15 minutes your meter data, you're sampling in seconds. And so you build up this vast amount of data that you apply AI and ML to, and that tells you your refrigerator's on, your refrigerator's not functioning properly. So these are the applications that you can use to actually do more customer engagement. Then of course, now the new trend, EV. And so for example, the UK government, we designed what's called a proportional load control system, wherein when EV chargers are there, then you can do proportional load control. Graham, I know, is sitting there laughing. He was a part of it. So anyways, but there's a number of items that are there that actually work for India and that work specifically for India as well. And one of the things is basically we talked last session about prepaid metering. That's a big item that's here. Then we have other, I guess, ideas behind using that data to make the experience for the lowest common denominator in India palatable. I was talking yesterday to the ex-CEO of BSES Rajdhani. He said that 60%, during COVID, 60% of his call-outs were because, were kind of call-outs where it had nothing to do with the grid or anything like this. What happened is, inside the home, an MCB tripped, right? An MCB tripped, but they had no way of understanding that power, because people couldn't go outside and check their neighbors and things like that. They had no way of understanding that the power's still on, but their MCB tripped. And so these are the types of applications that we can provide on top of the AMI data that's being sent, and then make it much more useful for the common man as well as industry as well. Then when you have EV chargers, for example, that are there, you will need to have load control management because, you know, India, power is a problem. Distribution transformers won't be able to handle, let's say, you know, 4 EVs charging at 30 kilowatts, you know, looking at 120 kilowatts, and the transformer is only rated for 30, right? You're going to get heating or a blowing or some, you know, an explosion. So these are the problems that the next level of applications that are on top of the metering data can basically help solve.
Thanks, Paresh. I think you have set context for a lot of future conversations here, you know, ranging from customer engagement that Vijay will be talking about later to overall grid management that can be really thought of as innovation and things like that. But I'll continue on the international experience charter, and Cedric, I'll come to you. You've been extensively involved in European market, right? And you have seen some bit of implementation in India as well, EDF working in India and doing some of the implementations. So what is it from your international European market experience perspective that you think India can look at, and what can we learn from, and how can we expedite some of the journey here?
Yes, thank you. I believe that there have been several interesting things that have been already said in the previous speakers. And I'd like to insist on one point, which is the hybridization of communication technologies. As you may know, well, I'm also chair of the technical working group for the G3 Alliance, and we develop a standard, that have been presented also in the session before, where today we provide what we call the G3 hybrid solution, which is a solution which is based on radio frequency communications, or RF mesh, but also provides a backup power line communication, in which we have a lot of experience, for example, in France and more generally in Europe, where a lot of utilities chose that solution. Of course, having PLC alone in India might be challenging, but this hybrid solution would probably bring benefits in terms of SLA and having good collection rates in India. But PLC does also bring good opportunities to have some advanced services for, well, you talked about power outage detection. We can also do it by RF, by the way. But also, since the power line communication signal travels through the lines, we can also have a lot of data, not only based on the smart metering consumption data, for example, but also on the data you can get on the telecom side. What does it mean if, for example, you detect that you get some attenuation of your signal? For example, oh, maybe this means that the impedance changed, so something changed in the home of somebody, and maybe it could explain why in a few minutes the RCD will trip, for example. I don't know, just kind of making, let's say, talking about that example, right? So for grid services, there could be a lot of things that could be done also. There could be, so I saw power outage detection. There's also, for example, in France, we have regulation that imposes utilities to have a better knowledge of their grid cartography, so all mapping data. So PLC can also help to consolidate this data, to correct it, for example, in networks which have, I don't know, 100 years old, for example, in Paris, where the network is very old. And sometimes there's some errors in the data we have, and where AMI can help correct these errors. Another example is also phase detection, which is very important to balance your three-phase transformers. If you have the full load that's just on one phase, it might be a bad thing for the infrastructure. So here as well, PLC and the hybrid, G3 hybrid, for example, could help a lot by providing this type of data and help the utility really operate the grids. And getting back to the customer, indeed, there could be a lot of services with interconnection between other devices and this infrastructure. There could be services that could be provided thanks to this additional data I was talking of. But one thing that is important, of course, you talk about customer engagement, but also there's the customer acceptance, which is also very important when we talk about data. And this is something we definitely need to think of for any AMI deployment and data analytics, which could be run behind. So that's maybe the final statement I could make on that.
Great. I think, I'll hold on to these points and come back to in a subsequent round where we talked about data coming in from multiple sources, right? So how do we bring it and tie it back to Ajay's point of SMOC Center, how it all is the future of that. So I'll park that for the next round for you. Ramana, I'll move to you. We've been discussing again about unified communication, edge computing, these kind of areas, right? So how do you think it's all getting, how is edge going to play a bigger role going forward, and how do you really see this entire scenario evolving, the meters really becoming more than, smart meters becoming more than just providing remote disconnect, connect, to what really do you think the future there would be?
Right. Thanks, Deepti. So yeah, essentially, I guess Cyan has been in the business of RF communication for more than, I would say probably more than 12 years now in India. A lot of field experience, by the way. And a lot of the innovation and a lot of advancements in technology that we've made is actually based on the field experience that we have gained from working in more than 10 different states so far. And we continue to work. I mean, we are part of the RDSS program and quite excited about the whole thing. And the back of it, the backhaul system obviously needs a lot of innovation and, especially when you talk about the edge computing. So that's a value proposition we bring to the table where, so a lot of the data processing and the optimization, right, it's a push that happens from the edge, ensures that there is a reliability of the data that is sent to the identity system or the smart metering, acquisition system at the front end. The optimization and the processing of the data is more faster and the reliability is more in that way. Now, going forward, this particular aspect of edge computing can be used for building other small applications also. The meters could be, obviously you could add more standards or you could build small applications inside the meter to do something like, Paresh said about, demand side management or outage management. These other applications could also be built within as part of that edge computing and taking a lot of the load out of the mainstream systems. That's one of the possibilities that we see in the future as far as the edge computing is concerned. Yeah, so, and then apart from that, we are also talking about, just one second. Yeah, we are obviously, we are doing the 4th generation of OmniMesh right now. So obviously the payload and everything that we talked about, that again happens from the edge computing that we do now. So yeah, that supposedly answers your question.
Yeah, great, thanks. I think, while we're talking about how applications can reside in mobile devices and help consumers make more informed decisions, you're also talking about applications residing at smart metering level itself, at edge level itself, and there can we do a lot of better network management and, outage management and things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's an interesting perspective that, how do we make smart edge, smart cloud and smart devices, all of these things come together to really realize the true benefits of this entire smart metering implementation and thereby actual RDSS objectives that we have of not just reducing losses but also ensuring more stable power supply, more reliable power supply. How do we make all these things together? So thanks for sharing that. Ramana, Yogesh, I'll come to you. The next big elephant in the room is cybersecurity, right? CEA and standard bit documents that we see, they have detailed out a lot of cybersecurity requirements, both for data, for data at rest and data in transit, right? What other security threats do you foresee and what additional security measures do you think they need to be taken once advanced applications start to come into the landscape? I mean, today the documents talk about what security measures to be taken to implement these systems, but yeah, future applications will pose different level of threats. So your perspective on that.
Yeah, thanks Deepti. Good evening everyone. Now, in terms of cyber security, we all are moving from manual systems to digital systems. Digital transformation, we are talking every now and then now. But when we had manual systems, okay, we had set of security systems deployed. So it could be manual security systems or some machinery or some kind of arrangements that we have made. So during the transformation from manual system to digital system, we also have to think of how we are going to protect that data and what kind of security systems we can ensure so that that framework is maintained, be it at the manufacturer level or in between or at customer level. So in that perspective, setting up the cyber security framework is the key initiative or the talk of the town or CXO's main agenda, I would say. So when we say about a cyber security framework, we have to look at from two perspectives. One is external and one is internal. Because lot of our data is in the public domain in terms of website. It could be in terms of mobile apps. It could be in terms of our social media or even our e-commerce platforms. So all these data is available in public domain, which is purely unsecured. There is no security. So how we are going to protect that. So when I started my company around 2.5 years back, and we pleasure to connect with UK entities to extend these protections to some of our Indian entities. So what we do is basically in your public domain, whatever data you have, okay, I'll take a short example. Suppose you have your website and it can be easily copied. So any student, 8th, 9th standard student can copy a website and he can create his own website, which is a threat for organization. So how we can get notified if any such phishing attempts are happening in the public digital world, if anybody is copying my mobile app, my data available in public domain, if anybody is passing any remarks which could be a reputational risk for my brand. So how do I handle this? So all this entire service we provide for protecting your data in public domain. Now the second aspect is how do I protect my internal network? So for protecting my internal network, I need to have a proper network architecture. Somebody is talking about consolidating the data or even distributed environment where I will have multiple endpoints. So more we are talking about AMI, IoT devices, OT devices. So we are increasing number of endpoints and which will be directly connected to your central data center. So this is actually a big facility for the consumers as well as we are moving towards digital. But at the same time, we have to ensure how that data travel, whether it is at rest or it is in transit, how it can be protected. So we are coming up with SD-WAN technology, which actually ensures that the data at rest or data in transit will be encrypted. Specifically, even after pandemic, people are talking about working from anywhere. Okay, that second challenge is my workplace or my colleagues, employees are working from anywhere. How do I protect? Because that data will be flowing to and fro and they will be connected to my network, whether it could be my own employees or whether it could be my vendors supporting from my outside. So all these things, I have to ensure a complete secured environment whereby at every point of time, I have to ensure that proper security standards are enforced and my data is intact and the uptime is guaranteed. So for all these solutions, we provide, whether it is external world or your internal world. What we have done, we are coming up as a single point of contact or one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity requirements, whereby you can explore your digital agenda in a more accelerated way and ensure secured framework. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Yogesh. Vijay, a lot of people talked about customer engagement, customer analytics and things like that. So I would like you to throw some lights, not just on customer engagement. We see consumers as one customer. I think even the workforce that we have, the employees, people who are actually doing work on the ground, they also become very important stakeholders, customers to IT solutions and things like that, right? So can you share a little bit of insights on the entire engagement with respect to consumers and workforce or mobility systems, how that's getting evolved? While we heard about smart edge, now let's talk about that aspect of the smart metering world as well.
Thank you, Dipti. Good evening, everyone. I think it's very pertinent to start this answer by quoting Isaac Newton, wherein he said that my powers are ordinary and it's only my applications which bring me success. So, and same thing is applicable to the smart meter today. So, it has huge power, but I still believe it is ordinary unless the applications are not built with the data. And I think every one of us here on the podium agree to what this saying says. And I think Paresh raised a very valid point wherein he mentioned how different countries have different kind of challenges today. And I personally believe that, in India specifically, the utilities also have different kind of challenges today. So the state discoms today, where Saurav mentioned the kind of roadmap that we have with RDSS scheme coming up, is humongous. And if you do the maths, and rightly mentioned by Paresh, that it is almost 2.3 lakh meters deployment every day, including Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. And to have that done, it's not only about deployment, it's also about bringing in the ROI. Okay? The debt condition with the utilities today, specifically the state utilities, is 6 trillion, right? 6 trillion rupees. And this is currently in a negative spiral. And unless you don't really make the DISCOMs Atmanirbhar, the country's Atmanirbharta is a big, big challenge right now. And I think the government, DISCOMs, and the technology all came with a common agenda that smart metering is one solution which solves this problem. And I again come back to the quote that my powers are ordinary and only my success comes through my applications. So most important part here comes that you look at the DISCOM maturity. Okay, so it's very different across the country today, and I'm sure across the world. So you can rate the scale from fragile to most matured. Okay. Now you have DISCOMs which are very fragile. So there are different medicines to that DISCOM to come to a little matured stage. And there are DISCOMs which are matured today. There are different medicines to them to come to a most matured state today. And ultimately everything will come through 4 pillars of excellence here for DISCOMs. One is of course people. Second is process. Third is technology. And fourth is network. If these 4 pillars don't really gel well with each other, what will happen is that you will give a Mercedes car, but you will not give a good road. Or you will give a Mercedes car and a road, but you will not give a good driver. So all of these things will marry each other eventually. And what will sit on them are smart digital applications. And this is where we take a lot of pride, in terms of SEW, where we come from. Today, we have almost more than 1 billion customers on our platform today, and we serve 400 plus utilities across the globe today. Now, when we do that, what we do for them? What is so different, Of course, it's the basic fundamental part remains the Uber experience that the customer and the employees go through. But more than that, it comes along with solving the problem statements that come along with it. So let me share with you what we are doing in the country today. So we are working with state DISCOMs currently to have a loss reduction dashboard, which in terms of, starting from right from the energy accounting to the distribution transformer overloading unbalancing, going down to the meter fraud detection and analytics with the AIML tools that we have, and lastly, the customer engagement side of it. So this is on the more on the analytics side of it. The second is the workforce mobility. Now, workforce mobility, we can imagine, if suppose, say for example, I have to start with my energy accounting process, right? And I identify that out of, say, these 500 DTs, distribution transformers, these 10 are bad, and I need to work on them. What is supposed to be done next? My field crew has to go on site and do the survey and catch all the NCs, non-conformities. And how do they do that? Today, if they do it in pen and paper, the whole essence is lost. So you need to have applications for your workforce mobility so that when they go on field, everything is captured, everything is documented, everything is standard to a degree that these are all captured at one place. And eventually, your analytics, which is at the back brain, everyone can't go at the site, right? In a DISCOM, there are 10,000 people working in a 700 square kilometer area. Not all can go to the field. So you have a back team who analyzes the whole challenges that are there with the data. And accordingly, the work order preparation and the job preparation, the inventory management happens parallelly. And the job distribution happens based on those priority distribution transformers. So this is a workforce mobility application. Paresh also quoted Mr. Bansal. I think he was referring to Mr. Bansal. So I worked with him. So this is a very common problem in Delhi today. The another workforce mobility application is, so the customer MCB trips. So now with smart meter, you have a meter ping functionality. So we have also deployed this at one of our customers, which is Tata Power. What it does is that when a customer goes and raises a no current complaint, before he can submit his complaint, the system will check whether the meter is able to ping. And if it is able to ping, he will tell him that please check your MCB. So these are very, very small, but very, very impactful things that come. And eventually with all of these things, we're going to have a very, very deeply engaged customer, Dipti. And more than that, I feel sometimes very bad that we as a utility will look at customers only as a cost center, you know, as employees also as a cost center. But how do we really leverage this huge customer base in terms of cross-selling and upselling many other things that we can do? So, for example, Tata Power today has a complete one SEW platform where they are selling their rooftop solutions to the same customer base. They're selling their EV charging applications to the same customer base, and they are selling their home automation services to the same customer base. While I believe most DISCOMs may not have this build-up ready, but they can even start with, you know, reactive power management solutions and so many, energy audit solutions and so many. So I think to sum it all, I think the crux really lies in terms of making our applications smart and the applications to bring in the success and not the power alone. Thank you.
Thanks, Vijay. No, I think that was very powerful what you said. And as you're talking, what just struck me is that probably, you know, our children today will not know what it really meant to have those landline phones at home and standing in queues to pay the bills and get those phones installed, and many months of waiting time that used to be there, right? Or if you look at financial world, I don't know, you know, 10 years later, even children will know what checkbooks look like. The concept of checkbook itself will be dead, right? So probably, you know, power sector is also set for that kind of a transformation. 10 years later, or maybe 5 years later, the kind of applications that we'll have and the kind of mobile apps through which we can manage the entire thing will be very, very different from what probably our parents knew. So I think probably our generation is going to see so many transformation in each and every area, each and every domain that we see, you know, be it telecom or financial or even power sector to go to you know, to say the least. And I'll start with the second round of questions. And before that, I just want to tell the audience that probably we'll have some time to take audience questions as well. So if you have any questions for anyone in this group, please start making a note, and you know, once we are done with this round, we'll throw the floor open for questions. Ajay, I'll come back to you. You know, so far we heard from different solution providers and all these discussions ranging from smart edge to smart cloud to you know, smart devices, mobile apps. You yourself talked about smart center, and then you know, we heard a lot on better energy management, outage management, and things like that, right? So as a DISCOM, what really would your priority be, and how do you see, you know, these things evolving, and how would you like to see innovation shaping up, a role of different types of entities in this? How would you like to build this entire area up?
Yeah, so let me get back again to the optimization of the AMI solutioning. And if you see, the AMI implementation and operations, there have been multiple challenges in terms of, you know, the known challenges in terms of, and people are talking about it very frequently, like the supply chain management, the field implementation challenges, the communication challenges, and other challenges and all. But the main thing and the crux of the matter is how, and I believe, whatever technology is there for the AMI solutions, they are mature enough to handle this kind of programs. But the main thing is how these technologies are being deployed and what kind of solution architecture is designed. Particularly if I say, I take example of any particular project, a single project, where if a solution, how the compute, the memory archival, and the database management is being structured, you know, particularly if the size of project is 1 million and above. In that case, the response from different applications would really matter to deliver the SLAs which is desired. And to optimize all these things, particularly on the cloud side, what we need a microservices based, you know, architecture where different services can be segmented and talk to each other on an enterprise layer type of structure. And we need a database management where if you see from the meter, apart from the events and alarm, three type of data is generated, that is billing data, daily profile, and load profile data. So billing and daily profile, if I see, they don't have much size and all, and they are basically related with the revenue protection and all. Because billing is your billing data, and daily profile we need for the prepaid calculations and all. But the main data, and which will be very useful once we deploy the structure in a way that we can really utilize the value addition. So that would be your load profile data. Now, everything goes to MDM, and they make MDM very bulky, you know. MDM is just to validate and deliver a particular kind of service. It's not there to handle everything, you know, which is not meant to be actually. When we talk about advanced analytics, there has to be some, I would say, some different module, if not built on MDM. It has to be in a structure where, on a database structure where, you know, a big volume of data can be processed in a very short span of time. So that kind of architecture we really need. And why I'm saying this, otherwise I have seen in my 4 or 5 years of experience, terabytes of data and analytics data, I would say, is dumped somewhere on the cloud. Nobody is watching that, you know. Nobody knows what to do with that data. So if this kind of structure we create, then only we would be able to leverage the real benefit out of this solution. And one more thing, when I say the kind of enterprise layer solutioning which is required, going forward, maybe the energy transitioning, which is a reality in the near future, which will be. And for that, what we need is the correct data collection from the ground itself, particularly the coordinates of the asset and asset mapping and all other data related to the consumer. So all these things, you know, we can drive only through a correct architecture and optimize data flow within the AMI structure, so that other futuristic applications can be seamlessly plugged into this entire solution, and the value additions derived out of it can be utilized for its proper use. So that's how I see it. Thank you.
Thanks. I think, you know, your initial part of the conversation, what you mentioned was typically what a cloud seller would talk about, that, you know, how do you really design a system to be microservices architecture enabled and really scalable, flexible, how you can really take care of, you know, so much of data that's coming in which is unpredictable. And I think somewhere you also talked a little bit about how can you really do visualization on GIS layer and things like that. So I'll pick that point later. Again, that's another topic, geospatial, very close to my heart. So, you know, I'll take that with Cedric at, you know, a little later. But before that, you know, Paresh, I'll come to you. You know, we've been talking about, right now, you know, when you talk about communications and smart metering, right, we're just talking about comms meant more for collecting data from meters itself, right? However, you know, with advanced applications, do you think a unified network architecture can also be evolved to bring in data from not just meters, but other kinds of devices as well? Things like, you know, transformer monitoring units, FPIs and things like that. So what's your perspective on that, on really bringing it all together?
Yeah, so just as in daily life, technology connects us in ways that we don't even understand, right? Same thing for, you know, we have this basically human type of system that's out there, and that technology is connecting it ways that we don't understand as well. You know, security is a big part of that, understanding that, but the crux of that is all of these systems that are there, the technology that's basically binding it, it doesn't have to be particularly one particular technology. right? And one particular technology may not actually serve the purpose. In some cases, power line communication is the best mechanism. In other cases, RF is the best mechanism. In other cases, cellular may be the best mechanism. And maybe in India, running is the best mechanism in some cases, right? From a very rural area that you can't just connect up to, someone has to write something and send it, right? So all of these things converge, and so the unification definitely is happening, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on the node side or the gateway side. That unification can happen on the server side, the cloud side, right? So all that, you can think of all of these as just sensors. What sensor we're putting on is we're just sensing electricity. But you know, if we want sensing electricity from the home, we're sensing electricity from a distribution transformer, we're sensing electricity from various other places, but that doesn't mean that we can't get weather data, we can't get other pieces of data. You know, then we can pull all that together, so the energy company says, oh, tomorrow is going to be 45 degrees Celsius. You know, my prediction is going to be that there's, you know, all the ACs are going to turn on at this time. You know, how to manage that. And all that data can be pulled in, so you can do advanced predictive analysis on this. And all the sensors can, and it can basically just view them as a sensor, and you unify all of that stuff, so then you can do the data analysis. And I think, you know, yeah, and for an example, locally, you know, when you look at just simply, one simple example is to stop non-technical losses, i.e. theft, right? If you put a sensor on the distribution transformer and you have sensors, the smart meters, you can match it up, and then you can see that if an e-rickshaw guy has put some lines on and is charging his rickshaw outside, which happened in the Commonwealth Games. And so, you know, these are the things that we can do, and we can basically put together, and the unified architecture, if we're not thinking about it, it should be thought about, and it must be implemented.
But I just wanted to add one point here. Are we talking about something like Wyson, where we could be at least ubiquitous devices, right? IoT devices with different, you know,
So now RF technology has various, various other mechanisms, right? So you have Wyzen, you have 6LoWPAN, you have LoRa, you have weightless, you know, and the list goes on and on and on. And I can sit here and talk for 24 hours talking about all these things. But the thing is that, yeah, what makes sense for India as a country is the technology that needs to be adopted. And if, exactly, a standardization has to be, standardization on some technology is going to be key. I mean, some technology, it's in its domain, right? Power line communications, G3 PLC, rather than LawnWorks or something else, right? In its cellular technology, instead of GPRS, maybe it needs to be NB-IoT. Right? It won't be Cat1 LTE. So anyways, those are the types of things that we, you know, you're saying, yeah, right?
That level of integration can happen at the head-end system, right? You get data from different sources, right? You know, cellular, NB-IoT, whatever. But I'm talking about, let's say, just in the RF side, you could have myriad kind of devices, you know, which are obviously having their own proprietary technology software. Are we looking at a future where you are bringing them together? I mean, you understand the Wyzen stuff more than me, but yeah, the Wyzen or some other standard that, you know, ensures that the utility or the smart city has the ability to quickly pick up any device and bring it up to the Wyzen network. Some sort of, yeah, go ahead.
So, you know, look, we're talking about electricity right now. Yeah, I'll then go ahead, Cedric. We're talking about electricity right now, but then there's gas, there's water, right? And then, and the reason why some of the RF technologies drop out is that there's a DLMS protocol that's sitting inside the meters, right? It's a heavy protocol, and therefore we have to use a more robust wireless technology. Whereas if it's a gas meter, all we're taking is a few pieces of data, we can use a different technology for that. Right. So, you know, you're right, absolutely. And so, go ahead, Cedric.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, you know, Cedric, if you just want to add on to this topic before I move to the new topic altogether.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot for allowing me to do that. I think you picked up the right word. You talked about GLMS, but you also said you talked about unification of infrastructures, of technologies, and I think that regardless of that, and by the way, GLMS could be used in a heavy way or also in a lighter way. What actually matters, it's to unify the data models to make sure that one system that works in that domain understands this other system that works on a totally different domain. Because when you're doing the data analytics, if you have just heterogeneous data, you don't know how to compare how to process, you'll be in trouble. So this is something that is very important. Standardization also on what we call data models and ontologies is something that is key, that all the systems get actually interconnected.
Great, thanks. And I think this entire conversation, the three of you, what you talked about, I think it just ties up very well with, if you look at any India stack or any government mission, it just talks about things like interoperability, standardization, and things like that, right? So I think it all ties up in utility domain with these principles as well. With that, I'll move to the next theme that I have. And I'll request Ashish, Yogesh, and Vijay to chip in that. My next theme is, we heard, what we heard and what Ajay started off with is it's an evolving space. A lot of innovation is required, a lot of startups and innovation. And you can't really procure innovation in startup through RFPs, right? You can't really write a scope of work and expect innovation to happen. So my question to three of you would be, what is the help that you need, or what do you think needs to be done differently to really ensure that innovation happens at scale in utility space? Given that a lot of utilities are government owned and they will need to go through formal public procurement systems and things like that. So what are the ways to really get innovation and startups engaged and new solutions evolving in this space? I'll start with you, Yogesh, and then I'll move around the table.
Yeah, very good question. Since our Honorable Prime Minister is talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, and we are not at all lack of talent. So in fact, the kind of innovations we are seeing in last 2-3 years coming up, actually surfacing. So we are sure like anything that we want, we can do, we can build, and we can serve. So that's possible. So couple of challenges what the typical startup like ours faces is like when you have innovation, you have idea, the immediate challenge is the acceptance to that and how you can put it in place. See, the financial challenge is a separate part that government gives me multiple aids and multiple schemes are rolled out and all those things. Even the repayment, on the repayment part also, the government has been very keen on getting us the payment within 30 days if I am a startup or MSME or that kind of thing. But that has been taken care very well. At the same time, how I can get the quick acceptance. See, because as a startup, that is my keen hunger, that I should get the market acceptance at the earliest. And that is the key. And I may not be, though I have the idea, I have the technology, but I may not have the scalability. So that is the one challenge that I have. So perhaps if the government can think about if they actually, I can't say enforce, but if they say like the big players in the league, they should actually, some part of their business should come from startups, or they should go hand in hand, or they should do something for the startups where by which I can get some kind of acceptance and the ball starts rolling. I think that would be a great help, I would ask.
Sure, thanks. Ashish, would you like to go next on this?
My view on startup or acceptance of solutions done by startup is two-pronged. One at the utility level, obviously the utility knows what they need and startup could serve that. And the second is at the, I would say at the system integrator level, like Mr. Ajay Sharma had in his previous stint. Yeah, he had, because in his previous stint, that organization was knowing what they would want to deliver, yeah, what the field requirements are. So they had actually published a need wherein they told that they invited a lot of startups. They told that we would take your product to the market, yeah, and the needs were very clearly defined as to what exactly are the needs. So, to an extent, I think the second approach is good because these type of organization, they actually know what the field requirements are, and they publish as to what exactly it would be, and they take it as, because they are heard more than anyone else, yeah. If you go as a startup to a utility, probably you'll not even be heard of. But then if a large SI or large enterprise goes there, they would be heard. And if they speak of some need, then yeah, that would be, so I would suggest that we should look at, in the system integrator, we should build a team which would always look at innovation, which Ajay is very much aware of that, what he had done.
That's an interesting point, because even at AWS, when I started this entire focus on working with impact sector startups, my entire focus was that how do we bring, in my head, it's a three-legged tool, startups or innovators, they become the supply side of it. Government entities who need this innovation, they become the demand side of it, and system integrators become the fulfillment side of it, right? So how do we really bring startup system integrators and government together to really get innovation at scale? I'll come to you, so your perspective, Vijay, on overall innovation, right? How do we really expedite innovation adoption in utility sector in the country?
I think that's a very, very good question, Deepti. I like to break it into two parts. One onto the operational side and two, of course, on the technology side. So when we talk on the operational side, the government, today's government is doing, what is the best possible thing that has to be done. Recently, our Honorable Minister for Power, he had, flagged off a theme where we'll have best practices shared across some neighboring countries in terms of power sector reforms. And I think something similar is required within the country, where what has worked for someone can be working for someone else. So, and something of this sort also got arranged last year with Powerthon there. But I think it can't be just one event and just be there. And somebody needs to review how it is being evaluated. A lot of innovative things came out there, and a lot of things. So somebody need to have a Shark Tank kind of a situation, where these things are really driven in a deep scale. Second part which is very, very close to my heart, and I personally feel that, every time I go bad, I go to hospital, I get admitted, I come back. Every time I go bad, I go to hospital, I get admitted, I come back. That's not the solution. So the hard steps, and I'm sure the government is taking those steps today, is the privatization side of really bringing utilities at core. Let me give an example to you. Delhi got privatized in 2002. The loss levels were 60%, right? And today the loss levels are 7%. So almost 21 years it took a great team to deliver what got delivered. Unfortunately, the technology was not that supportive that time. And today we have that technology support with us and the government support with us. So if the privatization happened with the right people, process mix coming in, I personally believe that what got achieved in 21 years at BSES or any other DISCOM, for that matter, great examples that we have, can happen in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line. So the government need to really up the drive in terms of the privatization side. Coming back to the technology side of innovation, I recall around 7 years back, 6, 7 years back, in the IIT Delhi incubation center, there was a student who developed a smart meter. And this was 7, 8 years back. So he came out with an idea of, pricing it to 999 rupees. Okay. And it was very well backed by the technology people at IIT Delhi too. And so he came to me when I was at one of the utilities, and he asked me that, how do I really roll it up? I said, you're coming to the wrong place. So if you come to the utility in terms of, telling what you want to do, is not the right way. So what the technology side people are also thinking today is that, say, Delhi has a subsidy angle for 200 units and 400 units. at times even for me, when it is the winter time, my units are like 410. And so people lose that 800 rupees subsidy. So with those alerts getting in and things like that, so how fast the utilities can come and give those kind of features, as an innovation track. And not, so utilities may like to keep something within the sleeves. So you understand why I say that. So there has to be some standards basis which the customer engagement, what is required, is really rolled out and given to the customers as a standard. So to sum it up, I mean, this is how both from the government side, from the utility side and the technology side, all three have to go hand in hand. And the Shark Tank idea is something very seriously we should think of.
Great, and we hope to see Saurabh very soon on some of the Shark Tank jury. Yeah, please share. Yeah.
So I completely agree with Vijay. The other thing is just what I want to share. I think startups need an entry point. And this is what's missing, is that there isn't a door open for them to kind of showcase what they know best, right? Because startups started because they have some idea, and it's a great idea, and they want to bring it out to market, but there's no really door open. How, for example, the United States, when government contracts are awarded, right? What they do is, let's say Lockheed Martin got an award for a new plane. So they're awarded points by the type of entities they engage with, right? And their reimbursement rate increases with the more startups they use, right? So it has to be at a government level. That's at the bottom line, the company wants to make more money, right? And if you can hit it where the pocketbooks increase by allowing startups to come in, then that's the way to achieve it. So that's just an example of what the US government did to actually enable more startups to get onboarded with next generation fighter jet programs.
That's a great point, and I think we are seeing that in India as well. Like you talked about Powerthon, right? And a lot of winners in Powerthon that happened. These kind of things. They did get government contracts. So like, for example, we have Asset Plus, which won some of this award, and they're working with JVVNL and entities like that, right? So I think we are starting on that journey. Yeah, but as you said, it can't be a point-in-time exercise. There has to be a continuous mechanism on how you keep evolving, developing. So yeah, so, doing a Shark Tank and people like Saurabh being on the jury and ensuring more of these startups get contract, that should be definitely a good way. But yeah, that's a lighter note, but I think, yeah, we are looking at how do we do more of these accelerator programs, incubator programs, and connect startups and utilities and things like that, right? And I think, given the audience that we have in the room and reaching towards end of the day, I don't think we should keep people here for very long. So I would like to open up the floor if anyone has any question for anyone on this panel. Okay. Doesn't look like any. I enjoyed this conversation. There is? Okay, perfect.
About public awareness, if it is necessary, then what steps to be taken to make aware about smart energy and applications?
Okay, sure, yeah.
So I think you're asking about public acceptance of smart meter? Okay. So I mean, I'm speaking from my experience, right? Our own experience of having deployed more than 12 million nodes.
From utility.
You are from utility?
Utility Karnataka.
So, a couple of things need to happen, right? Obviously, when you start bidding and you start entering into the process of, getting into a project, right? You may not be really aware of the ground realities, what you're getting into, what kind of areas you're going to implement the smart meters. So you will probably do all the survey at that point of time. So what needs to happen is that the challenge is obviously the customer acceptance of smart meter will have to be driven by the utility in terms of maybe, social media campaigns or mainstream campaigns about the benefit of smart meters. That we have seen actually works in a few utilities, right? When the government intervenes, the utility has to drive their entire effort to educate the customer through, through ads, programs and all that, which has actually happened in states where we work, like in MP and in Bihar. Even Twitter, tweets and all that about what's coming and what are the benefits of smart meter. That really helps. Apart from that, somewhat of flexibility, right, in terms of, you might plan to deploy the meters in a certain way, or in our case, RF, we want to deploy the gateways in a certain way. That may not really happen from the infrastructure point of view when we really go to the field. So we have to work with the customers on field to make sure that they're also comfortable, and at the same time, you are able to, obviously, get your act together. So a few thoughts, right? So I mean, in terms of, real field experience, and the main one, I guess, is the mainstream.
And cost matters.
Sorry?
Cost of meters.
Cost of meter. So the bid has to be opened for that, so.
Vijay wants to
Yeah,
add.
I want to add, since he comes from utility, I can relate to what he is saying. So I'm sure you are talking of smart meters deployment and people acceptance to it, the customer acceptance to it. And eventually, when we deploy smart meters in a utility, when we start with it, it is majorly in high loss pocket areas. And generally, so you have to really look at the gentry of what kind of people are there in high loss pockets. And majorly, if you look at the Indian strata, these pockets are majorly the slum pockets majorly, where the high losses are there. And with deployment of smart meters, the alerts are available and teams are able to take care to reduce the losses there in there itself. I think what has worked for utilities in India over the last 2 decades is actually a genuine connect with the people out there. So many utilities went ahead and empowered the women in those areas, okay, and created them as brand ambassadors, okay, and ran a campaign in terms of engaging them. So that is one side of it. Other side of it is now today with digitalization going so deep. Even a rickshaw driver will have a smartphone today. So most important is that you give them the power of their consumption in their hands. So if it is visible to them with the smart meters deployed for that section of customers, they're able to see how they are consuming and how. And trust me, the new generations that are coming in, even in these pockets, really don't want to get into this mindset of stealing electricity and things like that. So, you need to really look in terms of what has worked and possibly, and this really doesn't cost anything. Because as companies, we are supposed to do CSR, right? And if we divert this CSR into really engaging this faction of people, really helps us turn the wheel into a positive spiral. And lastly, to answer on the meter cost, I think in this section, the ROI is really amazing. So if your loss levels are 40%, you deploy smart meters and bring it down to 12, 15, it's done. It's a 1-year affair. And I was telling you, BSES and other Tata took almost 21 years to come to that level because technology was not supportive. But today, technology is in your hands. And DISCOMs today should leverage that part to really learn from what best DISCOMs did and quickly get their house in order.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Any other questions from the audience?
Actually, it's a general question. Instead of giving some, all the thoughts are going to give some, just giving a mercy to the consumers. Instead of that, we need to accommodate them as stakeholders, right? In that perspective, things has to be, if the utility is thinking that for every single paisa you invest, you need to get something back, at least for some period of time. You need to give some sacrifice to the, you should take care of the consumers and bring them as stakeholders, right? That is for, at least some cases should be there in India. Instead of, few more trust is required, and that is what is required, right? That I want to ask the panel. Thank you. So as we go about the deployment, probably with the kind of scale we have, what you are saying, it has to operate in the manner at a macro level. The utility has to not look at the number of consumers or the kind of unit consumption of the consumer, but an overall systemic change where the utility might be able to save, say, 1 to 2% of the overall power purchase. That itself will suffice for the business case. So the business case will not be apparent in, say, 6 months or 1 year, but over 3 to 4 years, there is a business case. There is nothing to be given to the consumers. At the consumer end, the only thing that, it has to change, and it will change in terms of consumer experience, and this becoming the stakeholder issue immediately will come up the minute the consumer is able to control consumption, set patterns to consumption, maybe not a subsidy alert, which might not be the best example for us, but probably in terms of, especially EV was mentioned. So in fact, a startup can think of a solution where we don't have to do unnecessary network expansion, because what is happening is suddenly there will be new load centers. So far, the consumer only had a refrigerator, a television, at most an air conditioner, which had some load, but definitely not transfer, I mean, not DT changing load. I mean, of course, with aggregation households, DT was changing. But now with EVs, even one household or two household might have an impact of changing the entire DT or augmentation of the DT capacity. What this will also do is, I mean, if there is a lot of peaking load and everyone charges at the same time, in a housing society, you have like 500 kilowatts of load. You set a DT to that load. That will be wasteful for the utility also. So prevent these kind of wastages that may happen if you don't have. That is where I think a startup can bring in solutions where you have this pro rata charging, as was mentioned by members of the panel, and keep the demand, keep the peak demand more flat, closer to the average. This will also help the overall utility power purchase cost saving, and also the network expansion will be more rational, optimal, more suited. I mean, so this balancing of load will be very important as we go ahead, because until now the consumer was not a load center in, I mean, maybe the high-end affluent consumer was, that was just 1 or 2% of the, but as EVs become a reality, as there is more and more shift of energy pie from mobility to electricity, we have to be mindful of the kind of network expansion we are going to do, how we are going to do this network expansion, so that that does not become a cost center. So the meter cost and this will probably be the least of our issues. The kind of analytics we can harness, and how, if there is a registry of electric vehicle and how that interacts with the grid, the entire RE integration, the time of day. I mean, these are things that the utility will have to now think of. This will be the utility business case, much beyond the meter, the individual meter cost. And because at the end of the day, meter is only a device. I mean, the data or the consumption or the read that is coming from the meter is the asset that the utility has. So both at the micro and macro level, relationships are changing very quickly, and the utility has to change the pattern of business. And what has happened in 20 years, as rightly mentioned, will happen in 2 to 3 years. We are seeing that Delhi, with the kind of geography, I mean, not just private, even state utilities are there at 7 to 8% AT&C losses. These business practices are available to state utilities also. So it's just a kind of cultural change, cultural shift, behavioral, and the tools are available. If more startups come in, and what was also mentioned, I'll just answer everything at once, that the funding issue, yes, I mean, because these are very specialized niche areas, so for any kind of debt instrument, these are not very obvious cases, because these are non-repeatable phenomena. Every startup will come with a fresh solution. So yes, we need to have some kind of policy, because every solution will be very different, and the accreditation and certification will not be easy about their scalability or their financial viability, which a debt or which a lender looks at. So what, I mean, they need a separate look. They can't be looked at in the lens of conventional lending. Thank you.
And I just want to share a very practical example when you talked about customer as stakeholder, right? A very practical example, my own father-in-law's experience, for example. He's a 70-year-old, gentleman, a house, family house in Varanasi, and now he lives with us in Mumbai. Before smart meters were installed in Varanasi, he was always worried that every month or every second month, someone, the DISCOM guy has to come and take the meter reading, someone has to go and open the door, and then the bill comes and he had to chase some relative to make the payment and do bank transfer to that guy, so on and so forth, right? Ever since smart meter has been installed, every month he gets an SMS that this is the amount that is due, and we just make online payment and his life is sorted. So I think, when we really ease out things from consumers' perspective in this sense, I think consumers will more than welcome this entire smart metering deployment. Yeah.
And just to add to what Deepti said, in fact, I 100% agree. That becomes very easy for the consumer to know what his bills are. If as a utility or as a consumer, they start getting a data as to when the tariff is going to change, because we have a tariff which changes with the unit consumption. Yeah, those could be given to them on mobile. So as our panel were also telling that the next generation is not wanting to do a theft of electricity, yeah, but they certainly want to save money at the same time. So if we can help them save money, which means that whenever they are going to move to the next slab, if we could give an alert, probably they could do a saving in advance so that they don't get into the next slab. Yeah. So those are the type of things which could be done innovatively, and which, if conveyed to the consumer properly, I think consumer would find it to be acceptable. Yeah. And yeah, so that's what it is.
Thanks. Any other question, or can we wrap up? Yeah, okay.
So just on the points that you were making there, so I come from the UK, so I've got a lot of experience with the UK rollout. And in terms of selling customer benefits, we're actually starting to move away from these kind of micro benefits, we call them, which is individual customers saving small amounts of money based on smart metering, because we found that customer buy-in was very poor, because at the end of the day, the amounts they could save by changing their usage patterns, for example, was actually relatively small. And the marketing around smart metering in the UK now is about the macro benefit, so it's about the benefit to the entire grid. So it's all about, you know, preventing overgeneration, for example, and how we optimize the buying of wholesale energy, which in turn brings down the overall cost to the consumer, to everyone, to the whole of the country. So that's the way we are starting to sell it. The other major benefit we are pushing is environmental benefit. So by not overproducing electricity, we're reducing our carbon footprint. So that was just a point on the previous. And within the India infrastructure, how do you see micro-generation being brought in? So in the UK, we've got a big push for solar generation and export tariffs, for example. So there's a really big take-up now in, you know, solar panel installations, and you receive payment for export back into the grid. We also see it with cars. So with EVs, they can act as battery storage, and the energy can be drawn down from the vehicles and pushed back into the grid at periods of high demand. So for an example tariff in the UK, you could charge a car at a very, very low rate overnight, and then during the day, during a peak demand period, the car actually pushes energy back into the grid. And I think, particularly for this forum with advanced applications, you know, it's something that I think, you know, could be quite applicable to this market as well.
You want me to answer, or does someone else want to take it?
No, you go ahead, and then I'll ask, you know, Saurabh to respond to that and summarize today's discussion.
All right, fine. So Graham, I think you're right. This incremental energy savings may not appeal to a whole lot of people there, but you know, when you talk about pounds versus rupees, it may make some sense. Okay, but then to your point about what was the last point? Sorry. Yeah, the feed-in tariffs and stuff like that, especially for EVs and stuff like that. Still, India's infrastructure, from cars to everything, still are not there to basically do V2G and G2V and all the other stuff that's there right now. But that's going to happen, and actually we're the people that are on this on this podium here are already thinking about how to integrate that into the whole AMI system. So it'll happen, but India will happen just a little slower, because I think India has some other problems they need to finish and fix first.
Thanks. If you can just respond and also conclude the discussion as well today.
I think the point was very similar to what we were talking earlier also, that any kind of inefficiencies in, say, overdrawal in the terms of over-injection or over-built-up of network, they mean the same things: higher losses, higher cost for the utility. Ultimately, that will be passed on to the consumer in one form or another. So it is essential. I mean, everything comes together. I mean, better analytics, better value for the consumer. And there are some direct benefits to the consumer that arise in the immediate month, in the immediate billing cycle. Also, I mean, the macro changes that happen at the grid level, at the system level, they also ultimately go on to benefit consumer in terms of better services, more capex, more reserves with the DISCOM, and finally better services. The relationship with consumer is changing, because it is no longer bi-monthly or monthly, as was earlier with a billing cycle, end of billing cycle. It suddenly becomes daily or even hourly in cases of certain consumer classes. An industry can decide when exactly, as we have more and more TOD and dynamic time of day tariff, an industry can decide which has the flexibility to use power at certain parts. Same for a consumer also, with better appliances, with more scheduled charging, with better kind of demand response. You can always keep scheduling your devices. The vehicle to grid idea, the grid to vehicle idea, that is already an idea, that thought is already available. So to provide peaking power as we have more EV influx, probably we can have more vehicle to grid charges, and the consumer can in turn get some revenue out of it. The grid can in turn benefit out of it. So, I mean, basically all of this boils down to the same idea: to cut down on unnecessary expenses, to use technology as a force multiplier, to use data as a tool for efficiencies in DISCOM, and ultimately, I mean, and also because this being a very regulated, I mean, this being a regulated sector, so everything has to go through a regulator. A regulator has to be given a use case. The regulator has to be given a proper business plan in the tariff petition so that this tariff, I mean, whatever we are seeking from the regulator is ultimately accepted. It cannot be simply a cost scenario for the regulator with no immediate benefits or with no medium or long-term benefits. So how we structure our tariff petitions, how we put the case for smart meters is going to be very crucial this year and the year after, because, I mean, we have to ensure that there is complete understanding between various stakeholders in the government also and in the regulatory side also, that the smart meters have a clear business case and ultimately they make more than, I mean, what we are paying for. So also, I mean, I'll just conclude with the innovation part. I mean, how innovation, so at least in the smart meter space with the kind of system handling we have predicted in AMISP with a system provider who will be there. Innovation, I mean, the procurement policies are going to be very flexible. So I am sure, I mean, with use cases and when utilities ultimately take over, any kind of proven technologies, any kind of proven automations are going to be a part of the legacy system then, and they are going to be continued by the utilities also in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for the very interesting conversation. And thank you for being such a patient audience. Very good evening to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for moderating this session. And thank you everyone for your valuable contributions and your insight thoughts. Now I would request Ms. Deepti Dutt to hand over the token of appreciation to our panelists, starting with Mr. Saurav Shah. Mr. Cedric Lavenu, Mr. Vijay Panpalia, Mr. Ajay Kumar Sharma, Mr. Yogesh Valunjikar, Mr. Paresh Patel, Mr. Ramna Rao Elchuri, Mr. Ashish Sahai, may I request Mr. Saurav Shah to hand over the token of appreciation to Ms. Deepti Dutt. Now I would request panelists to stand for a group photo.